August 16, 2018 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order, please. We'll start out by this.
I don't know if it's on it.
We'll start out by citizens forum. Citizens forum is when we have anyone who has questions or comments that's not part of the agenda. If it's something that's part of the agenda, please wait till that item comes up. I'm going to start out by, we have some training for planning commission members. The subject is private property rights. October the 29th, 2018, here at the town hall from 6 to 8. And it's no reservations required. We have to get so many hours every year of training. So this, since it's close to us and all, this would be a good opportunity. Plus, it's a subject that we need. So please write that down, October the 29th, 2018. Mark and I will try to remind you of this again.
What time?
From 6 to 8. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? We'll move along with the approval of the agenda.
Well, staff recommends that one item be added to the agenda as item number 16. Under what would normally be the approval of utilities, it's we would recommend, because of the scale of this project, it be a workshop discussion, but it's Verizon installation of underground conduit along the eastern portion of Kingston Pike. Basically, north side of Kingston Pike from Level Road to the Concord Baptist property west. So it's a pretty substantial project. A lot of the project is actually outside of the town, but that's the portion that's in the town for this particular installation. So I think the applicant at least wants to hear some feedback, and if you all have any concerns or questions, so that they can have some direction and maybe move forward with any revisions that they may need to make before formal approval next time.
Okay.
I'm going to move for approval of the agenda with the amended item 16, approval of utilities Verizon installation of underground conduit along eastern portion of Kingston Pike.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Anything else with the agenda?
No,
We'll
ma'am.
move along to item number 3, approval of the minutes of the July 19th, 2018 meeting. Any changes or corrections there? Do I have a motion?
For approval?
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item number 4,
Recuse, abstain as well.
okay. You got that?
Who seconded that, Ed?
No.
Was it Ed? Okay. Second.
Ed Whiting, seconded.
And then those that were absent abstained, Ron, Louise, and Roseanne. Okay.
Item number 4, election of officers, and this is for the Planning Commission.
Make a motion that we maintain the same officers that we currently have.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item number 5, let me go back one here a minute. We have a new member with us tonight that I would like to, Mark's going to introduce for us.
Of the new youth representative who we selected last month after we had 3 other candidates that applied. We had some really good candidates for this, and we selected Nick Lamandry. He is a student at Farragut High School. We've had an orientation with him yesterday, and he still showed up tonight. So I'm impressed by that. So maybe not after this meeting tonight. He may not come back. But we're glad to have him. And I told him after we reviewed some of the things that this commission does, this is a very important body, especially for the vision and the future of the town, which is what the young people are going to be inheriting. So that's why we want Nick, once he feels comfortable with what he's doing, to be an active member and participate in the discussions and input. So we're glad to have him.
We are, and for the audience purposes, he is not a voting member of the commission, but we do ask him to participate with asking questions and making comments. And so we welcome you. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 5. Planning Commission review of a proposed sports field lighting on the Lacrosse field at Farragut High School. Taylor Clark, applicant.
Item was brought to the staff's attention a few weeks ago when the coach for the lacrosse team at the high school approached us about adding some lighting to the playing field at Farragut High School. And they have a practice field and a play field, and they're basically wanting to light the play field so that they can play and practice in the winter months, when it is dark early, to give them more practice time. That's where the field is located, kind of in the northeast corner of the Knox County School property there. Really, it's behind the middle school property. So in an effort to put together a plan, they've tried to be respectful of the residents that are to the north and to the east of the field. So they've tried to orient the lights to where they basically just illuminate the field and face inward. They are sports field lights, so they are intended to be pretty bright, but they are not to be on past 9 o'clock. And actually, in terms of the foot candle measurements at the property line with the residential house lots, it's actually compliant with our outdoor site lighting requirements. So we require 0.5 foot candles at the property line, and this field would have 0.2 at the residential property line. So we're confident that they have tried to be good neighbors with this plan. They do have 4 lights, poles that they would be installing at the corners of the field, and they would directing them inward, obviously. There'd be 8 light fixtures per pole, 60-foot tall poles. This is actually coming before you under a provision in state law. I talked with the town attorney about this because, really, we don't have a lot of jurisdiction over the county property, but when they do propose new structures and improvements like this, it is supposed to be going to the Planning Commission for approval, actually. So that's why it's being presented to you, similar to what we do with utilities and road projects, park projects, and things like that. So with that, if you all have any questions, I know the applicant's here. He can tell you about what they're doing and why they're doing it, but the staff does recommend approval of this request.
Who are the closest neighbors that would be possibly?
It would be residents off of Sonia Drive.
Sonia Drive.
Yeah, and that would be
You come on up to the podium, please.
So it would be these residents in this area here. Then there's also some pretty deep lots in Farragut View that front on Admiral Road to the east that backs up to this general area. But really there's a few hundred feet between the edge of the playing field and the houses themselves. So, it's a pretty good distance, and there's some vegetation there. So, again, at the property lines, the foot candle measurements do comply with the town's outdoor site lighting requirements, and that helped ease my mind on what they're proposing.
Would you please tell us your name and give an address, please?
Sure. My name is Taylor Clark, and my address is 5416 Creekhead Cove Lane.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Clark?
Who's paying for this?
The Farragut High School lacrosse team, ma'am. Per Knox County regulations, Knox County does not subsidize athletics in any way, shape, or form. So this is all coming from fundraised monies from a booster club.
Or after we approve it? So it goes to the school board after we approve?
Yes.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? You have a motion?
Well, is there any comments from the audience?
Question.
Oh, okay.
In this agreement, they say the lights will be turned off at 9 p.m. Is that just a gentleman's agreement, or is that some?
At this point, it's a gentleman's agreement. That's what's being conveyed to us, and I fully expect that's what would happen now.
So we kind of adopted what the town of Farragut has with their Parks and Rec council, which is lights off at 10 o'clock, but obviously we're not putting them there we're not being there. We don't want to be there at 10 o'clock. I have a real job. I do not teach at the high school. So hence why we have to practice from 6 to 8 o'clock at night. And in the months of January and February, it's dark at about 5:30 or 6. So we need to be able to just have a safe place to practice. And
I don't
so,
have any objection to that. It's just
sure, but yes. So per your question, we will make sure that we are respectful of the time when those lights are on. I don't anticipate you driving by them and seeing them on at 9:30 at night.
Do you have evening games, or are they all during the day?
We do have evening games. Most of the time, we try to have a 6 o'clock face-off and try to get those over by 9 o'clock. This is not Farragut High School football and Farragut High School baseball where we're having the lights turned on still at 10 o'clock and 10:30 at night. We usually play on weeknights.
So if the game might go past 9, you would not turn the lights off, right?
Well, correct, but we would make sure that we make every effort to get the game over by that point in time. So, it's like I said, we try to face off by 6 o'clock. A lacrosse game averages about 90 minutes. So,
Where are you having your games now?
we play them up there, and we unfortunately are at the whim of the town of Farragut to try to buy turf time, which is nearly impossible at this point in time because of so many competing organizations to do that. So the recommendation was that we build a facility for ourselves. The football field is a great option, except it's not wide enough for lacrosse, hence why there's a soccer facility on campus as well. And the other thing is, if you can imagine trying to have a boys lacrosse team, a girls lacrosse team, boys soccer, and spring football trying to compete for the same acreage in a span of 6 hours on a daily basis, it's impossible. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. Lacrosse is the fastest growing sport in the country, and so we're trying to be able to facilitate that. But it's not only for the high school, it's for the middle school, the intermediate school. We've got about 300 kids that we support that field supports.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Good luck.
Thank you.
Planning Commission review item number 6 of revised preliminary plan for Virtue Road from the 2,200 feet south of Broadwood Drive to 700 feet south of Kingston Pike, Town of Farragut applicant.
Good evening. I am Darrell Smith, town engineer.
And your address is here.
I rarely get that out first thing. You have to tell me normally. This is a discussion of the Virtue Road project. This is the project is the improvement, the complete reconstruction of Virtue Road from about 2,200 feet south of Broadwood Drive up to about 700 feet south of Kingston Pike. It also will include a greenway on the eastern side of the project. You'll recall we brought this to you back at the May 17 meeting, and several of the residents that in Sugarwood subdivision that back up to Virtue Road expressed their concern that the project was impacting their properties too heavily. Maybe we could do something about the widths to try to narrow things down a little bit and try to stay off their properties as best we could. I've reviewed the plans so far. The plans are in great shape. Vaughn and Melton has done a very good job. I'll run through the things that they have done. This is what was requested by the Planning Commission in May. They've shifted the proposed center line of Virtue Road 2 feet to the west. They've narrowed the width of travel lanes from 12 feet to 11 feet. They've narrowed the width of the shared use path from, well, what we had back in May was it started as 12 feet, and as it went around behind the Sugarwood residence, it narrowed to 10 feet, just as a way to try to get as narrow as we could. But that was still creating an impact to them. So we're looking at just an 8-foot greenway on the eastern side of the project. And, of course, this is by pushing things west and doing what we can there. We're looking at some retaining walls. We had retaining walls back in May, but there may be a little bit higher, but overall, I'm very pleased with the project as it is now. And I think the residents, I see a few of my neighbors here tonight, I think they'll be pretty pleased with it. So, one other thing I wanted to point out, that was not in your presentation in May. Mark, could you move that along a few clicks? Okay, right there, the entrance of Brookmere subdivision. And we've tried to coordinate this with the designers at Brookmere to make sure their entrance is accommodated with this project. One thing that's required for that subdivision is a left turn bay. As you're headed south, turning left into Brookmere. So the road widens out, adds another lane. It's a symmetrical widening, widens on both sides. Be 3 11-foot lanes. You guys requested that we look at doing something to try to slow traffic down in that area. There is a median island. Unfortunately, it's right there at the match line on this. If you look at the far right edge of that,
Oh, I see.
you'll see a median island that hopefully will slow some folks down a little bit. Now, it'll be offset 2 feet from the travel lane, but we'd probably look to landscape that. Thank you, Mark. I should have asked you to, no, that's good. Hopefully that will add some element that will try to slow traffic down at that point. Will it make a difference on to the north of there? Probably for a few hundred feet, but I think with some tree plantings, a few other things, we should be able to contain reasonable speeds on Virtue Road.
I like that.
I do have a couple people that have signed up.
So, okay. You want to call, is that it with you?
That's all I had to
Okay.
say. Jason Elliott with Vaughn and Milton is with us tonight if you have any specific questions for him. And I know there are several of the residents from Sugarwood here, so they may wish to speak. I don't know. They've not really had a chance to review this,
Okay.
but
Daryl, how has these changes affected the budget?
affected the budget?
Yes, sir.
I don't think it's really affected anything
Okay.
severely. I mean, okay, the left turn bay there at Brookmere, that's a matter of stone and asphalt. Not a lot of extra money.
You know about the retaining walls is usually you can get a
retaining
lot of
walls?
dollars in retaining walls.
Probably nothing significant.
Nothing material.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the planning commission?
On the bridge, and I thought I saw it in one of the notes, here it is. Guardrail attached to barrier wall. Is that for the bridge? There's going to be a guardrail attached there between the pedestrian trail and the bridge, or what is that?
Help me, Jason. I'm seeing, well, there's always guardrail at the approach to a bridge. And I'm seeing guardrail there, but I'll let Jason speak to this.
I'm Jason Elliott. I'm with Vaughn and Melton Design Engineers. We are,
Address?
pardon?
Have your address, business
It's
address?
1909 Ayler Avenue, Knoxville.
Thank you.
We are adding a barrier between the shared use path and the travel lanes on this project to create a safe corridor across the bridge for bicyclists and pedestrians. And so there's an exposed end to that wall on either end of the bridge, and so we will be connecting guardrail to that barrier wall, which is a little different than a regular bridge, which you would just have it on the very outsides. This one is actually inset a little bit along the travel lanes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else on the Plan Commission have questions? Anyone in the audience?
I do have a couple of people that signed up.
Okay, go ahead.
First one was Ricky Bullock.
If you signed up, please come over here and get up, ready to be next.
I'm Ricky Bullock. I live at 12217 Butternut Circle. That is in Sugarwood. I'm one of the property owners that backs up to the project. I spoke with you in May also. What little bit that I've looked at the plans, I'm fairly pleased that they've done about as much squeezing as they can. I'm mainly up here because I'm still very concerned about the attempt at what we can do about slowing the speed down. I had asked about the look at possibly a reduced size, I don't know what the requirements are, of about a roundabout. And I'd like to know if that's been looked at or not, which obviously if the island is down there toward the new subdivision, I'm thinking back up toward us at Broadwood. I don't know if that's feasible, but reducing the speed and all the other conversations that's taken place, I do not believe is going to be effective for doing any speed slowdown. We don't get any tickets written, so I still believe that this is probably in the best interest of not only Sugarwood, but all people passing on the road. And I think it'll be two things. One, slow them down. Two, it's becoming more apparent that even people trying to get in and out of Broadwood, which is the back way out of Sugarwood and into Sugarwood, and a lot of people use it for a cut through the Kingston Pike all the way up to the front of our subdivision, that right there, that road drops, and I don't know how much the elevation change will do there, but it appears to me that in addition to slowing down, it would make it a lot safer for everyone to turn in and out right there. Twofold aspect is what I would like to hear, considered, and I don't know if there's enough room or not. It seems like the golf course kind of flattens out there, and like I said, a reduced size, so I don't know if you really looked at anything physical like a roundabout to address the speeding issues. It just continues. It's not going to get any better, and it's just going to be more traffic than what we have now. Thank you for your time. I don't know if you all reviewed that or not.
Let's talk about that.
I'd like to know what might have been spoken about it. But,
We did look at a roundabout at the intersection of Broadwood, and roundabouts require quite a bit of real estate to build. I can provide sketches that we've worked up, but it was deemed as, I would say, prohibitive to the impacts to private property right around the intersection. But we did explore that possibility. Now, there are smaller footprints of what they call traffic circles. I don't know that would be appropriate for this classification of roadway, though. Those are used usually in like park areas or something like that. And the minimum roundabout diameter is 110 feet. So again, I would be happy to provide that to anybody interested in it, including Mr. Bullock. We did look at it, and I can provide those sketches if we can discuss it further.
Anybody else have any questions on that? Have our next speaker then.
This is Jim Anderson.
I have Jim Anderson, 12223 Butternut Circle. I wanted to basically come up and thank the Planning Commission and thank Darrell and his team for taking another look at it and trying to take the impact of the families and the residents out of the plan. I know it was a lot of effort. It was a lot of patience on this team's part. Obviously, everything that you can get to the west, and I said at the tail too a minute ago, would be better. But you're off the properties. You're right at the edge, but you're off the properties, and I want to take the time to thank you. So that was it.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? That's it, Mark.
All that signed up for that one.
Got a comment? Was there- I noticed that in the data that was presented there that the 85% of the traffic was in 50 miles an hour on that road, which is,
No, that's correct. We did a speed study a couple of years ago near the bridge there over Little Turkey Creek. 85th percentile speed was 50 miles per hour. That's on probably 10-foot lanes.
yeah, I don't know how you ever control that unless people just.
It's difficult. I mean, it's,
Until we
and
get
I will say, while this road is going to be a little bit wider, 10% wider from 10-foot lanes to 11-foot lanes, that doesn't mean there's going to be a 10% increase in speed. It is not a proportional thing. So I really don't see any increase in speed.
Well, no,
Through the
you're stretching
section.
it out, so you can probably increase the speed.
Yeah.
Daryl, what about the roundabout at Needlegrass Lane at the entrance of the new subdivision? Couldn't we shift Virtue Road over onto there? I mean, most of that's floodplain and not real valuable property or usable property at that. It's like that might be a good candidate. I mean, I think roundabouts do a good job of slowing traffic down. And if the entrance to Sugarwood's not a good candidate, maybe the entrance to the new neighborhood would be a good candidate for a roundabout. I know we talked about this a couple of months ago, and I can't remember all the details of our conversation regarding that.
I'll defer to Jason on that. That's not something that has been looked at yet.
I haven't looked at that, but it's easy enough to see how it would fit in that location rather than at Broadwood.
Well, at Broadwood, if I take that 50 or 60 foot right away and double it, it takes a lot of folks' properties, kind of crops the corners off and significantly into the golf course. But it seems like at the new neighborhood, that might be a good candidate just to shift the whole roadway over to the east a little bit, and then where it comes into the base of the new entrance, which is all part of a roundabout. And what are your thoughts about the roundabouts? I mean, I know I significantly slow down when I'm going down Mcphee Road. There is no way around it to go around the roundabouts. It seems like they do work.
Yeah, they do. I'm a proponent of roundabouts. They're great traffic calming. And I think in this location, as long as we could coordinate that with the developer of that new subdivision, we might be able to make it work there. It's something we can definitely investigate. They would have to sign off on that, I guess. The developer, they'd have to probably modify their entrance some.
They probably
to
would,
make
but
that work.
I suspect that the majority of that area down there is open space for that developer anyway. I think, do they even have any lots on the west side of the creek?
They will have a recreational area there because there is a high spot there.
Right,
It's
closest to
out of the
Sugarwood?
flood.
On the kind of,
Yeah, I think it's.
I mean, it definitely gets low. I mean, the flooding problem is down by the old driveway is where, so I would assume, obviously that's the
I think it's
lower
on
area.
the south side of Needlegrass.
I don't want to start over with this design, but it seems like that if we all agree that roundabouts work, that this might be a good candidate location for it.
But would the island,
I mean, to me,
provide some
the island
calming?
it's kind of like Grigsby Chapel. I think they're pretty to look at. I'm not necessarily sure. I think it keeps people from traveling in the center turn lane when they shouldn't travel in the center turn lane. But I'm not sure they necessarily slow traffic down. I think the roundabouts, you physically have to
Well, I
slow
agree,
down
but-
to go around it, and unless you want to, really
I
risk
definitely-
your life and limb over it.
I definitely agree with you, but I do want to point out one thing that we've not talked about. We would have to look at the impact of the golf course as well.
Well, I'm talking about maybe
realize this
sliding
is
the whole
something-
thing. Maybe we'll take a couple hundred feet back. See how we're starting to send the walking trail off on a tangent to the east
Right,
there.
right.
Slide the whole roadbed over, and that way we could locate the entire roundabout in the existing right of way and over in all this open space, and we could give the developer credit for their open space requirements as part of this. That way we're not taking their open space, but otherwise I'm not going to call it free land, but it's a lot cheaper than the golf course land. And it seems like to me, as a developer, I would love to have a roundabout at the entrance of my subdivision
Yeah,
because it makes
I like
folks
the
stop
idea.
and slow and look.
Yeah. But again, I just want to make sure that everybody understands, we don't want to affect the playability.
I agree.
At the golf course. We just, spent a lot of money for affecting number 12 at Willow Creek on Kingston Pike.
Sure we did.
So we would want to look at that. Honestly, I'm not sure the layout of that hole there. I think it's number 5.
Well, my thought is, I mean, if we need a minimum of 110 feet, so we need to double the right-of-way, essentially. I mean, you've got a sphere we're dealing with, or circle, and we could just shift everything over. And if you're shifting over 50 feet, over a couple 100 feet north and south, it's not really that much. You're not moving the roadbed over. Now, there may be other coring issues or geotechnical issues that we got to deal with what kind of subgrade is there. But it might be something worth looking at to be able to, and someday, when we do the next section of Virtue Road, maybe there's another candidate location further down Virtue Road as it gets closer to Boyd Station. We can get another roundabout. I think the roundabouts on Mcphee work. I think they slow traffic down.
Right. And that's what we're looking at on Union Road. So, I mean, I agree. It definitely makes the oncoming motorist aware that they're in a place where they need to be a little slower.
And my thought is, if we don't catch it now in this phase, we're not going to get a roundabout in this phase.
Right.
I mean, it's until there's a redesign in 40 years.
Is it close enough to Kingston Pike to cause that slowdown, or is there
That's
still too
75
much space
feet
in
right
there
there.
to people to
I think
speed
that
up?
is still,
That's like-
The middle of the project,
that's toward the end.
the southern end.
People want to speed back up on the straightaways, they're going to speed back up. But it seems to me it's sure going to help. It would also seem like it could create some traffic gaps for the folks pulling out of Sugarwood, and make it a little easier for the folks pulling out of the new neighborhood on Needlegrass to be able to get out. You know, as the Choteau Basin develops and it builds out, we're just, that road's going to have, I don't know what the forecast ADT on that road is, but I bet it's a lot.
Like 110 feet right there. I shift that up.
Anyway, I'm not trying to send you back to the drawing board. I had mentioned this a couple of months ago when we looked at it. If we could incorporate a roundabout and it makes sense, and the traffic engineer says, yes, that this is a good thing here, then, and it financially makes sense, I'd like to look at it.
It wouldn't take long to explore that
Okay.
possibility, and I can look at it probably next week and get something to Daryl.
Okay. We
Seems
appreciate
like to
it.
me it would provide an extra added feature with the entrance to and from the new subdivision there on Needlegrass.
I agree. I mean, I always thought,
Cars are speeding there on Virtue Road
well, there's no doubt when they come around the curve.
south,
Pass-
it's going to be hard for those cars to get out of there.
Well, we fixed a little bit of that curve with this new design, taking the dog leg out of it. You straightened it out a little bit, but there's no doubt people are, when they're heading northbound, they're accelerating out of the curve, and this would be something to help force them to slow down.
Distance, how long is this? What's the scale?
Got one more.
We have one more person to,
Have
has a
Rick-
question or comments?
Rick Creekmore.
Hi. Rip Creekmore, 12301 Butternut Circle. Backs up to, it's on the corner of Broadwood and Virtue Road. So I agree with, I think, everyone's concerns as far as the speeding. So for 19 years, we witnessed it firsthand pretty much the entire time we're awake and out on our deck. My suggestion is there's an easy fix. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It's the same as what's been done with Smith Road, Grigsby Chapel, and multiple places where there's four-way stops, three-way stops. You just make it a three-way stop at Virtue and Broadwood, and that slows people down. I think the concern right now has always been when you're coming south, coming from Kingston Pike on Virtue Road, you do have that little hill, so it's a little bit of a blind spot, but with the change of the road design, there's enough of sight vision out there. I think you just make it a three-way stop, and that solves the problem quite a bit, I think, would be my suggestion. The other comment I want to make, I agree with my fellow residents. We're very happy with some of the changes that have been made and listening to our concerns and everything. I'm still not completely sold on the idea of a greenway on Virtue Road. I think it'd be better to have the 5-foot sidewalks similar to what is already on Kingston Pike and what is coming in the front entrance of Sugarwood Subdivision. So I'd sort of like to see that instead of a greenway. But thank you.
I would like to address, I understand that, a lot of people want to see additional stop signs to slow traffic down. And we follow the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, the MUTCD, and they require that an intersection meet warrants for a multi-way stop. I really don't feel that Broadwood would meet warrants for a three-way stop sign.
Darrell, can you explain what that means to people?
The warrants for a multi-way stop, it's really thresholds, volume thresholds for traffic coming out of the minor roadway.
Meaning you want them to be almost equal to what's going on Virtue is going to have.
It's better if they're about equal. Virtue, I have no doubt, with the speeds, there's no doubt that the main roadway would meet warrants, but the minor roadway, Broadwood, does not have nearly enough traffic on it to even approach the volume required to meet warrants. The problem is that when you have multi-way stops that are not warranted, regular motorists that drive by there every day, they drive by there several times a day, I know I do. If they come to that stop sign every time and they stop and there's nobody there, and then they roll through, well, they start getting a little anxious, and eventually they're doing rolling stops. It's not really a good idea, and sometimes they just blow right through. That stop sign gives a false sense of security to anyone coming out of Broadwood that, oh, that car's coming here, they have to stop. And they pull out right in front of it and get nailed. So it really creates a more dangerous situation than it resolves. So that's why we try to follow the manual completely.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments?
He has one more.
Mr. Anderson again.
It's Jim Anderson again. I don't know if I have to say all that again, but just a question on the warrants, and I'm still happy, but I'm just asking the question. Doesn't the Grigsby Chapel fall into pretty much the same category where it wouldn't meet the warrants? And I would just think that would set a precedent to allow a three-way stop. I think it's a great idea because it would. I know when we're on the back of our deck, it's, the Indianapolis 500 on Virtue. It's one of the reasons my father loves to come to our house and sit on the back deck to see people fly off the road. So he sits out there and drinks his coffee every morning. But I don't know if that sets precedent or not. But I mean that's out of my game. But it just comes to my mind that we're already doing that at Grigsby Chapel because that thoroughfare going straight is far out more percentage-wise than the ones coming out of the neighborhood. So just a comment, question.
Which one are you talking about? At Smith Road and Grigsby
Either
Chapel?
one of them, actually.
Well, the three-way stop at Grigsby Chapel, I travel at just about every day. And that one there is competing traffic. Most people, I've not seen many people roll through that. Typically, when I get to that intersection, there's somebody else at that intersection. So everybody takes their turns. The ones I see people blow off are on Smith Road, in front of Andover, and in front of Hickory Woods. People roll through those all the time, and the dangerous part about that is we have a sidewalk right at that entrance, and I've seen some near misses there because people roll through it because they're not used to seeing someone at Andover or Hickory Woods. I will point out to you one where there is a four-way stop on Ridgeland and Campbell Station, and that's because of sight distance. Mm-hmm. That's required there because coming out of Ridgeland from the east, there's not enough sight distance, so they need that four-way stop sign there. And the people in Ridgeland are they have to treat it like there is no four-way stop because they don't just roll through it, they blow it off. And so that's a very hazardous situation, and we're stuck. If we didn't have a sight distance problem, they would take that four-way stop sign out. So
I still question it. You're going a lot slower than into the 85th percentile at 50 miles an hour if you're rolling through a stop sign. But
Thank you.
Is there any reason, funding or grant otherwise, that we need to be in a hurry on this design? I mean, is there a deadline coming up for some sort of matching grant that we're trying to?
No, this is totally town
Funded.
capital.
Okay.
funded.
So then maybe we can spend a little time and try to get it right.
Well, actually, the plans at this point are 99% right-of-way plans. It's not ready to go to construction yet.
Right.
But we're not far away from being able to start the acquisition process.
Okay.
There's a few tweaks here and there. We can look at this and look at the idea of a roundabout.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't want to look at the idea of stop signs, though, at Broadwood. Like I say, it is not a situation that would meet warrants. And where we have placed stop signs in the past that really didn't meet warrants, we get a lot of complaints. I've argued in the past on, well, it doesn't meet warrants, and we wound up with a stop sign there anyway. And people complain. They say, well, at least they slow down. Well, if I get hit at 30 miles per hour as opposed to 50 miles per hour, that's a good thing, I guess. But
Right.
I still argue against unwarranted stop signs.
Well, let's explore the roundabout at the new subdivision and see if there's some things that might make sense there. Maybe we can
Just slow down.
come up to something that's a win-win.
Irritating.
We'll do it.
Comments?
No, I agree with you.
Need to get you-
Roundabout's
come up to
probably
the-
best option.
Come up to the microphone. Need your name and address, please.
My name is Kami Darakshani, and I live at 12213 Bergen Circle, and my house faces the road that you people are trying to improve. My question is, what is the difference between the sidewalk and Greenway? And why can't we have a sidewalk as it is right now, which is concrete, and it lasts longer, instead of taking it out and putting a Greenway, which is made out of asphalt?
The asphalt walking trail accommodates more users,
I know,
folks
but
like on a bicycle
I've
or.
lived there for 20 years. I don't see more than one or two people going every day. So what's the use of it?
Well, we're hoping ultimately that this will connect all the way down to Anchor Park and Turkey Creek, and so this is one portion of a puzzle. So it takes us a while to get there, but the greenways in other areas of the town, like off of near Greasy Chapel, they're heavily used once they connect and go somewhere.
You haven't even funded the phase 2, and that's going to take another 10 years.
It very well could.
So in 20 years, you're going to connect them, so you have, by the time you do that, the asphalt is all gone.
Well, we
You
hope
have
not.
to repave it again.
But it does take a long time. We have a lot of greenways that go nowhere right now, but we do ultimately get them connected.
I think we should keep it as it is, make it out of concrete, wide enough, and forget about making it that wide for somebody that never uses it. I never use that thing. I don't know. That's my question. Is that
We have
a
an-
requirement that we have to have greenways?
We have an awful lot of people in our community, in our town, that do use greenways and are constantly asking us to connect more and more of them.
Well, I've never seen anybody in front of my house going by every day.
There's not a greenway there right now.
I know, but it's going to take 20 years because phase 2 has not even been planned yet.
Well, we got to start somewhere. But you're right, it's going to take a long
By the
time.
time none of you guys are going to be here, unfortunately.
You may be right.
That's my comment.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
So we're not making a motion tonight? Are we?
We'll move to defer or what?
Or add that as a
Well, I think
subject
if
to?
you, yeah, I mean, if you want to include that as a recommendation, what Noah was suggesting about looking at the roundabout, if you all feel that that's
Yeah,
something
I may
you
be
need.
the only one that the roundabout's appealing, and so if there's some other folks on.
We need to talk to the developer of,
Yeah, I mean, there's
we
a
really
lot more
kind of need to
involved
get
in
engaged.
this.
Well, yeah, there's definitely other factors at play, whether or not this, but it's if we don't do it now, we're never going to get it in the future.
I'm just, yeah,
So,
I'm
but
just
you're right.
asking if, are we ready for a motion or are we going to?
No.
I think we're
I don't know if
we're
it's
making.
necessary, but I mean, I would prefer approval subject to
To review.
us talking with the developer, talking with the golf course, looking at effects it would have,
Right.
and making the decision. So maybe you can approve these
Subject
plans
to.
subject to.
You're asking for us to approve what you've already, the changes already written here,
Yes.
and I think that's fair.
If you come back with a roundabout, we're going to have to come back and look at that. I mean, there's
I
no
don't wanna
public
come back.
discussion of that. Well, I know you don't. I know you don't. We don't want you to, but if we're going to seriously consider this.
Well, we'd really
it
like
has
for you to seriously
implications of having to
Oh,
deal
we
with
will.
to
the
consider. I
development
mean,
and
it's
everything else.
if we
It's
give
not
you
ready.
approval tonight, it's just going to be easy to say, "Oh, let's just stick with the plan and don't deal
Yeah.
with all this." I've been there and I've done
Okay.
that, but we'd really like
You
to
need to defer it.
to seriously consider if we're not under the gun for any particular reason. Then I would really like to defer it until we have a little bit more information to give you an approved plan without a whole bunch of wiggle room.
Sure.
So.
That's
We need a
fine.
motion for that.
Yes.
Move
It's an action
move to
item.
defer.
Don't see a
Second?
problem with making,
Need a motion for that? Just postpone it.
Did Noah make a motion?
Subject to, we don't
To
know.
I
what-
think
defer.
Ed made the motion to defer.
and
I make a motion to defer this to the next
And I
meeting.
seconded.
All those, we have a motion on the floor to defer and a second.
Discussion.
The motion is to defer,
The motion is to
and
defer.
so I think we now have a call to order.
Don't you need to add and to consider the roundabout?
Well, we're going to defer. So basically what it means is we're going to ask Daryl to bring this back to us.
Yes.
And what we're doing is we're putting a little bit more pressure on you to try to incorporate a roundabout.
Okay.
So, and if it can't be done, it can't be done. But we really want to seriously make a good faith effort to be able to figure out a really good, effective traffic calming. And we've really good at traffic calming in this town, and I think roundabouts work best.
Yeah. We need to make sure we've shaken this tree before we make the decision.
There you go.
Right.
So
Well,
all
I
those-
will say that anything can be done with enough money and a big enough bulldozer.
I know.
So,
I know. So.
To us, and we'll go, there's plan A.
So all those, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? So it is deferred, and we'll see you next month.
Whenever you're ready for it.
That might not be next month. You think so? Okay.
Too hard because it'd be too easy to say we can't do a roundabout. So if you need an extra month, if you think a roundabout is feasible, if you need extra month, that's not a problem.
My concern is having something designed and ready to show you.
I know.
In the next 2 weeks, because it's,
Right.
while it's a month away,
You need
we
is
have
a
to have it ready
concept to
before.
show what, if you had to, I think all you need is a concept that's kind of laid out to
Sure.
show dimensionally what we're talking about and what you can do.
Okay.
It's something you can use in discussion with a developer and something you can do a kind of overall kind of price look. But, I mean, the idea is just to evaluate the merits and wring it out a little bit and see if it has any merit.
Okay. Jason, are you okay with that? September?
All right.
Okay, thank you. Item number 7, Planning Commission review of proposed Kingston Pike Greenway Underpass east of the intersection of Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road, Town of Farragut applicant.
And for my next trick.
Yes.
This is a pedestrian underpass of Kingston Pike from behind the Greenway behind the Brooklawn Shopping Center, the Kroger Shopping Center, extending under the Arch Bridge at North Fork of Turkey Creek. This is about 400 feet east of the Campbell Station Kingston Pike intersection. This was brought up by one of the board members a couple of years ago. You can see the design there. The idea is to connect that greenway from behind the shopping center, go up to the north, go under the bridge, turn and tie into the sidewalk on Kingston Pike on the north side. This project will really be a great connection at some point when the Craig Allen property develops, because his plan is to have a greenway along the creek extending up and actually extending over toward to Campbell Station Road, probably through our outdoor classroom. So this is something we want to pursue. Naturally, that's all floodplain in there. Mark, I don't know, did you have the other drawing?
Yeah, that's basically what we would be modifying under Kingston Pike, adding some concrete and basically a walking surface.
The idea is to have enough width pretty much half of the arch width would have this concrete pad running through it, about a foot above the normal flow elevation.
And it's just designed to flood during heavy rains.
Right, it will flood during heavy rains. It does increase maintenance costs because Public Works will have to go down there and clean it out occasionally. But most people aren't out walking during a storm, but
Let's hope not.
I hope not. I wouldn't walk through there during a heavy storm. But
It looks like there's not enough height there to make it any higher, is there?
That was a concern. What we're looking at with this
7
drawing
feet.
here, there's about, 5.47, 5.5 feet of
Width and 7 feet of vertical clearance.
And you can't move it over more toward the center?
Well, someone shorter can walk.
You're getting closer to the creek itself.
Remember, I mean, it's
the further you go to the
a
middle.
sidewalk. Our
7
sidewalks
feet.
are 5 feet, our concrete sidewalks, so
Right.
we're given 7
Right.
feet of clearance, unless you're
Yeah. At the
Prima Dual
midpoint, it's
Jabbar,
7
that
feet.
should not be a problem.
Walkway.
We will have to sign appropriately. I'm not sure how to do that, but we'll find out. I don't want people to try to walk over on the far right side in that drawing because you have no clearance. But just staying toward the left side of that path, of that pad of concrete, there'll be plenty of clearance for anybody.
Hey, Daryl, because it will be something that does get flooded, I don't know if this is something they think about or not. Is there a different type of texture that, something that you know is going to have water on it and?
It will be something probably a little rougher than just a standard broom finish.
Okay.
And I dare say that Public Works will be over there with a pressure washer occasionally to
Get the algae
Yeah,
off
it'll
of it.
get moldy and,
Yeah.
yep.
clean it up,
How often does it flood? Do you have, how heavy of a rain does it have to be, and does it?
I honestly don't know, but I would say it's going to flood fairly regularly. The water will be up.
It only takes a
Over the
foot.
top,
I live
yeah.
on that creek. It goes up a foot a lot.
It goes up a foot a
half
lot.
inch or an inch of rain in an afternoon, it'll rise, which is not a big deal. I mean, I think this is an awesome alternative. We've always talked about the intersection of Kingston Pike and Campbell Station, about how to be able to get bicycles and pedestrian traffic from one side of Kingston Pike to the other. And I think this is a great candidate site for it.
It's not short.
What's the difference from the north side to the south side? How long are you underground?
That's a question.
Well,
Put lighting in it.
the roadway width there is 55 feet, so you're looking at probably 75 feet in that arch.
Do we have to do a little right-of-way acquisition from Craig Allen, or can we do an easement?
Right-of-way acquisition on both sides, the two property owners.
You don't think we can do just an easement on it?
We can look at it
No, no,
to do it that way. Yeah, I would prefer to do an easement.
I mean, it should save the taxpayer a few dollars.
Sure.
So.
I know we've seen pictures of it, and of course, it looks lit from the pictures, but that's a pretty long tunnel. Are we going to put any lighting in there?
We're not planning on putting any lighting in there.
Okay.
At this point. Looking at it, it's
Pretty bright?
during the daytime, it's
It's
pretty well,
Right.
pretty clear.
Any more questions or comments?
We have someone that signed up for this when you're ready.
Okay.
Carol Christopherson.
I wouldn't use it during the day. I've told them that.
Carol Christopherson, 11320 Gates Mill Drive. I am speaking to the tunnel that you all are proposing, and I would like to say I am not in favor of tunnels. It's fine during the day, but all sorts of things go on at night, high school kids, and we're lucky we don't have a lot of homeless people who live around here, like there were places where I used to live, but I don't like the idea of a tunnel. I suspect it's the cheaper way to connect across, but, and I live right there, and I am all for it. This is a personal interest of mine to get something where I don't take my life in my hands trying to get across the street. But I would like you all to look at a bridge, a pedestrian bike bridge across that street. I think the more I thought about it, the more I thought it would be a beautiful, pretty bridge across that area, and you could have welcome town of Farragut. I suspect you need a little bit more room on both ends for the pitch, but is there any possibility that you could do a pedestrian bike bridge across?
I'm sure it comes down to dollars. I mean, the reality of it.
Yeah, but safety, a 55-foot long tunnel is creepy. And all sorts of things go on in a creepy tunnel, and especially now that I find that it's not going to be lit. Just seems like you're asking for trouble. Plus that it's now going to flood too, which I didn't know. So it just seems like a poor solution to a much needed, it's a solution we need, definitely. But this doesn't seem to me to be the right way to go.
You're worried about the security and safety are your primary concerns.
Yeah, I mean, especially with all those high school kids right there. I mean, it's just begging for people to go in and, do whatever. It's just not to me, a good solution. And when you think of what a really pretty, simple, I don't know, whatever you make it out of, stainless steel, wrought iron, I don't know, whatever, bridge going across, it would sort of give you the impression of a town. You've got that intersection, which is one of the biggest ones around, and if you had a little pedestrian foot bike bridge across there, it would kind of start pulling things together. It would be, I think, very attractive, and it would certainly meet the needs of people trying to get across the street. And yes, I'm sure it would cost more money, but I think you're being penny wise and pound foolish.
Okay, thank you. Daryl, do you have any comments on that?
Thank you, Carol.
We have looked at pedestrian crossings, bridges in the past. Now, I envisioned something like the bridge over Cumberland Avenue up in the UT area. Great pedestrian crossing, just beautiful. It says University of Tennessee. We could have Town of Farragut. I don't think you could build that now. First off, that topographically, that works beautifully because you have walkways coming right into it. It meets all ADA requirements. It's perfectly suited.
You're talking about the Tennessee Bridge or the tunnel?
The UT
Okay.
Bridge. The tunnel itself, I would compare this something like the tunnel under Kingston Pike up near Tyson Park.
Well, you got 10 Mile goes under the interstate in the city of Knoxville, and it's a longer tunnel. I mean, it goes under I-40. I've gone through it many times. I wouldn't go through it at night, but it's much longer. It'll be a fair amount longer than this one. There's smaller tunnels in the Alcoa-Maryville Greenway system. They're smaller than this, obviously, but then they have some clearance considerations in some of their tunnels too. They're actually lower than 7 feet. Some of their tunnels in Maryville and Alcoa. So, and then in Townsend, you've got some tunnels that go under 321, and that's a fairly long tunnels there that might be fairly comparable to what we have here. Now, they don't have the creek along them, but they do have tunnels that go under that state highway. So it's not uncommon in the area to have tunnels. So,
what's the budget for this project, Daryl?
I think the total budget was around 300.
What did you say, Darryl?
I'm sorry, I think the whole total budget was around 300,000.
Can I just say something real quick?
You need to go back to the microphone.
Okay, good enough. Just to be clear, I wasn't thinking about like the Cumberland Bridge. I was thinking of something very light and airy metal, and certainly something substantial. I mean, you don't want it to fall down like that bridge in Italy, but something much less imposing than the Cumberland Bridge.
The problem is we would have to deal with ADA standards, which means you have to
That's-
ramp it,
that's
which
correct.
means you have.
We would have
It's
ramps
not going to
that
be
have to go back and
simple
forth.
and
And I think of
very attractive.
the
It'll
bridge that
be-
I think that's closest to this is between Maryville and the airport in Alcoa.
Right.
That big, and that's you have it's a big albatross.
Well, this would probably require a cage, fencing.
Oh,
We don't
okay.
want people up there dropping things on cars as they go
have
in.
same issues with either one. This to me, it's an alternative. Personally, I wouldn't use it. We were talking about putting one under Kingston Pike at Everett Road, which is it's an alternative if you have a trail along that creek bed. It would feed out and possibly feed into something else. If I were running alone, I wouldn't use that. I wouldn't use this. But if we had the Craig Allen's develops, and you have some kind of festival going on, I could see using it in that because there would be a lot of traffic. Once you have a lot of people using it, and that's what we're envisioning for our downtown, our town center anyway, is having that kind of pedestrian traffic where something like this would be an asset, and it's cost-effective way to get people across Kingston Pike in a safe way. The bridge, you get into a lot of problems with ADA, and where do you put it so that you're not blocking the sidewalk for people that want to. I'm not sure that it would be what you're imagining and what it would end up looking like are two different things.
And running the risk.
But
of
I
people
understand
throwing
your
things off of it.
concerns. I understand your concerns.
And maybe
but
being that the tunnel is already there, maybe we're premature. We could always, and this is really more of a board mayor and alderman decision, but maybe it's something that maybe it's not going to be used at this point until we have more development, either on the old Kroger site or on the Craig Allen site. Maybe we're just not there yet. Maybe you need more people to help the safety factor. And maybe if it had, and then maybe we could light it. I mean, all of a sudden, if Louise saying, "Well, I'm not going to," I wouldn't use it. Then I'm thinking, would you saying at night or at any time during the day?
I wouldn't. I don't. I run, and so we proposed one from underneath Everett Road, and I said we've got a great crosswalk that I.
Saying you wouldn't use that one Everett Road even during daylight.
I would use my crosswalk.
Okay.
I'm out in broad daylight, and I feel very safe in that walkway. But I can understand the need for it or the use for it if there's a lot of traffic. If I saw a lot of people coming in and out, I would. Like I've gone running at UT and they have a tunnel. But when people are actively using it, then you feel more comfortable. When you're going in it by yourself,
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't do Uber either.
Okay.
Well,
I would use it. At this point, our board has already approved it. It's been on our capital plan for a couple of years now. So,
We have been talking about it for a
Yeah,
while.
I figured it had. Otherwise,
And
it wouldn't be
even
in
with-
front of us
yeah.
if it wasn't on the CIP.
Yeah.
I have two concerns. One is the lighting issue. I was concerned about that, and I would like to see lighting. The second is I think it needs a railing. If it has any substantial amount of use, you got people going in both directions. You got a 5-foot sidewalk, and maybe a railing there just to protect someone from dropping off.
Lighting's a great idea, except
Mark,
I worry
how is that
about.
done on-
Well, that's
in
why we
Maryville
didn't.
and
You can't
Alcoa?
because it floods and then everything
Bunch of
gets
debris.
trapped.
They don't have
Yeah.
an edge like this one does. It would need a railing. Yeah.
Oh,
This
would?
one
This one would need a railing?
I would
Is it because it's more than 30 inches of fall? Is that what's triggering the railing? If you fell in the
No,
creek?
it's about 1 foot above normal flow, so you may be 24
Well, to me,
inches
a railing,
drop.
you're asking to have to go declog a railing
Right.
multiple
Yeah,
times
I
a
can see
year.
a lot
If you
of
got
debris getting caught on it, yeah.
Well, that's my understanding because I asked about that during
Yeah,
the
that
time
may
that we were
that would
planning
be an
it.
issue with the flood regulations, yeah, and maybe why they didn't show
That's
it
what.
on there.
Yep, that's
Yeah,
what
so-
the issue was.
I mean, that's
Probably
that-
because of the amount of clearance, it probably is not a requirement to rail. I don't know. I'd have to check on that. To
Well,
be
normally
honest.
I'm just
30
concerned with people traveling, walking in both directions. And I was saying,
Getting
get a
crowded in
5-foot
there.
sidewalk, someone's walking with
30
a
inches is
stroller
normally
or
what
something.
triggers a railing. If you have more than a fall hazard over 30 inches, then you trigger the requirements for a railing.
We could look at that. I just don't know the answer to
Yeah,
that
the
question.
western side, the
It would
western-
affect the flood.
Is a little higher.
Western side of the barrel, I would think is probably not more than 24 inches below the concrete slab.
Okay.
The water out there is probably going to have, does he show?
Yeah,
normal
a
flow
little
with
bit,
that?
but it's just kind of, I'm not sure it's to scale. But,
It's-
you know,
it's
if,
not
depending on
right.
how wide it is, you may have 12 inches of water, maybe 18 inches of water during the
Right.
springtime. And obviously, it is going to flood, but that's, you know, that's part of it during heavy rains.
I think it would be nice, but.
So how long does it take something like that to go down?
It goes,
No telling.
Depends on how much it rains.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
amazingly, Rita, it drops almost as fast as, now it'll run muddy, but it drops almost as fast as it has risen. It's really, it's amazing. Even like the big rain we had last week, we had what, 2.5 inches? I mean, it went up and then discharged and then came back down. So
If you have one of these
I don't disagree with that.
thunderstorms out here, it drops 6 inches of rain in the hour.
we got other problems
really
besides,
flood.
right. Yeah, we've got a lot of, there's going to be problems all around the town that Public Works gets to deal with. I think I support this idea. I think we've got some other issues to maybe work through, obviously the railing and, you know, talking to Bud and, you know, and that might create, you know, problem with your HEC RAS on this. You might have a real issue with
Well,
putting
that's
more
true.
obstructions in the floodway.
As this is floodway.
Yeah.
You know, we are having to go through the CLOMAR process, the conditional letter of map revision, and the LOMAR, the letter of map revision, after that. It's a very time-consuming, expensive process, but
The trouble with a bridge
Creative.
is that it would have to have towers at both ends, which means people, you know, walking down staircases.
Have ramps. That's the thing.
you
We've
have
got
to have
ramps now.
either ramps or elevators.
Yeah.
So,
okay, do I have
I
any-
just don't think a bridge across Kingston Pike, well, for one thing, it wouldn't be very attractive.
When it's all said and done, it would
I
be
don't know
nice
how you
if-
can make it attractive anymore.
Darrell, I'm gonna just throw a comment out. I know it's back to the board, mayor and alderman, but, you know, I seriously, personally, as a, well, I'll say a citizen, not just a member of the MPC, question why we want to spend $300,000 on this project, because it's, number one, it's not going to be used very much. If we're going to have a festival, for instance, well, what's the difference between that and having all the parking across from the old Kroger, going to the football game, or going to the red light with a big crosswalk and enhancing that crosswalk, or the one down at the corner? I just think this is way premature to try to stick this in. It kind of looks like we're trying to shoehorn an access that's going to have more problems than it's worth, and we got other things we could spend $300,000 on. That's a BOMA problem, not mine, but
That's not my decision.
Any more
Well,
questions?
there are a few other ears in the audience and up here.
Any more questions or comments?
Just a comment, I'm so sorry. The more I listen to this, the worse it sounds. So I'm really sorry. I mean, if you can't do a bridge, that's one thing, but this tunnel sounds ridiculous. And I totally agree with Ed that $300,000 for something that floods all the time and has no lighting is just, it doesn't make sense. So I would respectfully request that you think of something else to get people across.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Is this an action item? Do we need to?
No, it was just for
Okay.
review.
All right.
Well, ultimately, it'll be something, if it moves further, you mean you'll need to approve it under that provision in the state law that I talked about with the lacrosse field lighting.
Okay.
But it sounds
For
like
tonight-
there's some uncertainty at this point.
For
so
tonight, this was
need to
for
work
discussion
out.
purposes only. Discussion purposes only tonight?
Review, what does that mean? What's the difference?
You can just recommend to defer action if you want to. I mean, if you're not comfortable with, it sounds like you may not be comfortable taking a formal action on it. I'm not sure where
Could we
it
make a
goes from here,
recommendation
but-
to send this back to the board of mayor and alderman to revisit the item?
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure you
I'd
can
make
do that.
I'd make that motion.
I'll second that.
What was the motion?
Send it back to the board of mayor and alderman.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Ron, and Ron back there. You
Who
guys get to deal with
seconded
it.
that,
All those in
Roseanne?
favor, we have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 8, discussion and public hearing on a request to fill, stabilize, and construct improvements within the sinkhole area in association with an expansion to Mcphee Park, 917 Mcphee Road, Town of Farragut, applicant.
This, actually back in August of 2017, the Planning Commission approved an update to the Mcphee Park Master Plan. And we've had our consultant, Ross Fowler, they've been working on coming up with Phase 3 development. And as part of the development of the design plans, they've come across a closed contour, kind of in, a prime portion of the developable portion of this expansion area. And so this is being presented to you under the sinkhole ordinance. As you all know, about a year ago, we revised our sinkhole ordinance to give it some, to address some situations that weren't originally addressed in the sinkhole ordinance. And one of those things that we provided for was for the Planning Commission to consider an application to modify a sinkhole, either fill it in, stabilize it, construct structures over it. And then there were some parameters provided in the language of the ordinance that would give you some guidance on how you would evaluate and make a decision. One of the things that's talked about in the ordinance is that the Planning Commission may, in the review of the project, determine that it's appropriate to advance some type of competing and adopted public policy or public interest, and that basically the impact of modifying the sinkhole is outweighed by the public benefit of doing that. So in the park's design, as was approved as part of the concept, they're trying to maximize the recreational potential of the property to give the town the most bang for the buck and its citizens the same. And basically to try to completely avoid the sinkhole, and let me just highlight where that's at. But it's basically that shaded in area. To completely work around that and not disturb it at all would significantly alter the plan. Basically, the way they've designed this is to work as best they can with the topography of the property and to try to maximize the buildable area. And this sinkhole is kind of in a prime location on the property. There's actually the Demick's old driveway goes right through the sinkhole to his house. So, I mean, it's not like it's been undisturbed. As our consultant outlined in their proposal to you all, to avoid the sinkhole would create a significant increase in development costs, which would impact the taxpayers, and it would significantly result in a loss of usable recreation area. The amended ordinance does provide for the opportunity to have studies conducted to give you all good information on what the impacts of adjusting or modifying a sinkhole would be. The town did hire a geotechnical engineering firm, Foundation Systems, and they prepared a report. And basically, the summary of their report indicated that filling the sinkhole would have minimal to negligible impacts to the groundwater resources. And they recommend that the sinkhole actually be filled to help stabilize it because you would redirect the water that's currently going to that, which ends up potentially causing the sinkhole to expand over time. So this could actually stabilize the situation. So basically, their recommendation is in your packet. We do have representatives from both Ross Fowler and Foundation Systems here that they can go over the specifics of what this involves, how much fill is involved, and what are the anticipated impacts. The staff would certainly recommend, and I'm sure we would do this, obviously, to follow if you all are in agreement with modifying the sinkhole as requested, that we do follow the recommendations of Foundation Systems that was in their April 26th sinkhole exploration report. And it's very detailed as to how you build back up this sinkhole, excavating and coming back in with certain type of material to help stabilize it and make it suitable for the improvements that are proposed in this area. So with that, if you all have any specific technical questions, they're here to probably answer those.
Mark, I've got some questions because I need an education on sinkholes because I don't even know. It says here watershed of approximately 4 acres. Is a 4-acre watershed considered large or small or
I will
minimal?
defer to the Foundation System. You want to answer that question? Because I'm not an expert on that.
Eric Peterson with Foundations. I'm the geotechnical engineer with Foundation Systems Engineering. Our office is at 2203 Ashley Street in Knoxville. Answer your question about 4 acres. That's actually a really small watershed. If you look at the topography, basically, looking at the property that drains to that is basically just on that hillside. So only on that hillside will water flow down, or currently flows down to that area. So it's a really small area that contributes water to the area. So it's pretty easy to control that water with drainage swells or whatever to pitch it away.
Also, it says in part of the study that it looks like there's evidence of a karst system underneath. By leaving the sinkhole as is, it sounds like there's an opportunity for that to apparently get worse because you know that system is existing underneath the sinkhole and water is going to drain in there. Is that correct in a very crude, rudimentary way?
Currently, the sinkhole as it is without any improvements, I would recommend nobody build anything on it without improving it because you're right, water is still making its way to there and seeping into the soils, and sinkholes develop, ground collapse sinkholes develop due to water infiltration. The recommendations that we provide in our report is, and I'd also want to say that East Tennessee is riddled with sinkhole activity, and the majority of East Tennessee is underlined by geology that is susceptible to sinkhole activity. This right here is an old sinkhole that I would consider as inactive. It had its ground surface collapse a long time ago, and it widened into a bowl shape over geologic times, and it has been filled with some topsoil, alluvial organic material. And so our recommendations are to strip out the organic layer, use reinforce it down to stiff residual soil, reinforce it with some geotextile, come back with the geotextile. It's basically it's a high modulus woven blanket. It's kind of like silk fence, but like material, but it comes in big sheets and it's got some strength to it. But that's just for reinforcement. Compact some clay soil and get it to drain. Once you remove that water coming towards it, you're going to have over 20 foot of a stiff upper crust that's going to be there to support anything that you put on top of it. In my opinion, the risk of a sinkhole dropping out, provided that the recommendations as provided in our report are followed, would be lower there than a lot of other areas underlain by the same geology.
And so the clay is what holds it when you,
The stiff upper crust, basically, as moisture migrates through the soils, it carries soils fines down into the bedrock. And as you start to develop a little void or unconsolidated material right above the rock, and then over time, that void or that material continues to be lost until it can't hold itself up. If you remove the major source of the water, that the risk of you continuing losing that material will dissipate.
And what's the life of that fill material?
As long as it's maintained proper drainage,
Forever?
as far as I know,
As long as we're around?
as long as any of us are going.
And this is, one of my concerns is, I don't know that, do we permit this very often in the town? Are we setting a precedent by doing this ourselves? Are we setting the precedent of going down the road where we're going to start seeing us requests for filling sinkholes in a similar situation as this? And how do we feel about that?
Well, I think the key word is proportional to the public interest involved. So I'm very supportive of this, but it is important to point out this is something that we would never allow a private individual to do in a development or on their property. But there are some real good mitigating factors in this particular scenario, most of it being the public interest involved versus a private developer is typically one person's interest versus all the taxpayers. So I think that under certain scenarios, this can be done. Generally speaking, we would never want anybody to touch a sinkhole, get anywhere near it. Matter of fact, we even require a 50-foot setback from the last closed contour. But there are some other factors here that apparently we've already looked at redesigning the park and coming up with other ways to be able to get the new roadbed in, some of the amenities that we want. And I think that's been exhausted. And this is the most reasonable way. And unfortunately, this one thing is an obstacle to us trying to get our plan ultimately to fruition. But you make a very valid point, Louise, that does this create a slippery slope? I don't think so, because we do have some language in the sinkhole ordinance. It's almost like we forecasted this. I know Mark didn't see this coming, but we put language in there that in the event that we're trying to do something in the public domain and we just don't have any other way to get around it, there is a way to be able to modify sinkholes.
And there have been a couple of private properties that we have allowed them and recommended that they fill in the sinkhole.
Okay.
For safety reasons, stabilization reasons.
Okay.
Kind of like what this, I see this as a stabilization exercise.
Did we find a throat on this one?
I would
Never
think
found the
that-
throat?
No, there's not.
Okay.
I would consider this an old, inactive, it doesn't have a
So,
throat.
okay.
Yeah, we've
And
had.
that's sometimes
I
we
know
look at when we have
three
throats.
places in town that are private property lots that where they have filled in the sinkholes. Every site's different.
But we wouldn't let them build a structure on it. There would be a big difference on that. And here we are proposing to build a structure within the sinkhole.
Right.
I would say that part unnerves me.
About the structure?
The structure.
Well, it's not a house. I mean, they're not going to be sleeping in it. At least we hope not.
Well, every
That's why I
sinkhole is
asked for the
different,
life of
and I
the
think
jury.
that's
I
one of
think
the
the
points.
danger-
Is that this is a kind of an abandoned
Use your
one
mic.
almost, if you will.
I'm sorry, I got a question about, we're talking about sinkholes and structures, and if a structure that as a park structure imposes little or no risk if it collapses, that's one thing.
Well, if we felt like there was a reasonable risk of collapse, I don't even think we would be here. I think what we have is we have a geotechnical engineer saying that he can't make any guarantees, but in his opinion, I'm paraphrasing here, this is not going to collapse. If it's done appropriately and correctly, we really don't have a matter of fact, I think he even went on to say that other areas in the town where we have not defined sinkholes probably have a better chance of collapsing than this particular area after modification.
That's correct.
Okay. Did that help? That make you feel a little more comfortable, Ed?
Well, Yeah, my point, or I guess what I'm thinking is that we're talking about prohibiting, we prohibit a private citizen from doing this. What makes us think a community body is more capable of making that same judgment?
You got a good point. I think what we're trying to say is this is something that's for the public good. It's not for one
that-
individual.
No, well,
Public versus
we're
private.
making it for the public good in the first place. If in fact there's a, even though it's just an infinite chance of the structure collapsing or being, and you have to consider that it's got to be done in a manner in which it's easy to evacuate. There's no, if you have problems of something happening as a building and there's nobody sleeping in it, there's nobody constrained in it, that sort of thing. And it's basically, I don't know what this building is supposed to be doing.
Well, it's a pavilion. Obviously, there's always the risk of collapse, but I think what our geotechnical engineer is saying that the risk here is less than even areas where we have houses today that are not even determined to be sinkholes after this particular modification is done. My biggest concern goes back to Louise. Does this set a precedent in the future that somebody will come back to us and say, hey, you did it for yourself, why don't you have to follow the rules? And that is something for us to consider.
Well, there's a big difference between public domain and private domain.
I agree.
And we need to keep that in mind.
And let me ask you this, we know this is going to be a park, even if we didn't put a pavilion there. We probably shouldn't leave that in its current condition, knowing people are going to be running across it or doing their things. Is it?
Absolutely.
We have sinkholes.
The
There's
risk
sinkholes.
is much greater with leaving it as it is now than it is filling it, Ed.
Well, I think we've got to be careful going down that, because then all of a sudden we're making an argument, oh, it's okay, let's just fix all the sinkholes.
Well,
and
that's
I think
what I'm
generally
wondering.
speaking, I think that the experts, which I'm not an expert on sinkholes by any stretch of the imagination, but the experts generally say, hey, leave them alone, don't touch them. And so I think that is the best rule of thumb when it comes to good development practices.
But do you have a sinkhole in a public park that people are utilizing as a
Well,
soccer
seriously,
field
there's
or-
sinkholes in Bridgemore. I mean, we don't make them fence it off and say kids can't go kick a soccer ball in it.
That's true.
There are
Also-
typically sinkholes in lots of parks because a lot of homes try to stay out of them, so.
Okay.
Also, we want to make sure that we have in our ordinance or have in our recommendation that we follow their recommendations.
Absolutely.
So,
I think that's the staff's recommendation,
Right.
that they be followed.
Yeah, we recommend that and to follow the applicable provisions of our sinkhole ordinance as it would apply to this request.
also, Mark, do we want to include a letter of credit for this? And how do we do that?
No, it's our project, so
Okay.
We're on the hook.
we just need to make sure when we're evaluating it that the proper documentation is provided throughout each phase, that they are following the recommendations. I'm sure the town would want them to follow the recommendations because we're going to be putting our improvements over this area, so we of all people would want that, so.
Any other questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second. Go ahead.
Roseanne, second?
Yeah.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you for all your information. Discussion in public hearing on a final plat for Eastern Park subdivision, a portion of parcel 59.10, 59.11, tax map 152, 15.45 acres, 38 lots, HFTC GP applicant.
There's a variation from what that description says, but due to weather delays, what they're requesting at this time is to final plat approval for basically the house lots are on the east side of Anchor Vista Road. That's the road that's being constructed, the spine street that's going into this development. This is a subdivision right across from Anchor Park. It actually came to you all with preliminary plat approval back in January of 2017. So what they're requesting is for financing purposes to try to move forward and have a portion of this platted. And this particular phase, Unit 1, would include a total of 14 lots, 13 house lots, and 1 open space lot. And that's the north end of the development. This actually goes to a couple of existing residential house lots, and one of them, if redeveloped, would the road would continue on into Briarstone, so that would be a continuous street all the way to the Briarstone subdivision, which is now connected, to Audubon Hills. So that's the request. The staff has been out to the site this week. In terms of the condition of the site, it really is below the standard of what we would typically feel comfortable recommending a final plat for. We have postponed this a couple of times, and they have been working on things. The staff did include a punch list of items that if you do feel comfortable taking action on this unit of Easton Park, that the items 1 through 12 would need to be satisfactorily addressed. And staff would note that even if the plat is recommended for approval with these conditions, it could be weeks before the town itself can sign off on the plat, because we have to be comfortable that the project is safe to start construction, that it meets our field-related requirements, the stabilization, backfilling, and all those things that we typically look at to make sure that the project is ready to have house lots started. So I would just note that, because I don't want there to be any surprises that it could be maybe almost by the time of the next meeting before we actually sign the plat. So we'll see. It depends on how much progress is made on site and in addressing these remaining items. But that's the request at this time. My understanding is they would come back in a couple of months to plat the remainder of this development. They do have base stone down on the 2 cul-de-sacs, and they have the walking trails, I think, at this point, all paved, I believe. So that's a summary of where we're at. And I don't know if anybody has any questions. I think the applicant is here. If you have any questions of what their plans are, and
I'm just a little dense here on what we're asking for this time. I'm a little confused.
Phase
Is it
one.
the 14 lots?
it's everything that's outside of the cross.
Just the
hatched
14
area.
lots?
Yes, ma'am.
Final plat means that they've put in all of the road and all of the public road and
But they haven't done
infrastructure.
that's what you're saying.
No, they have,
Saying they have on the phase 1 part. They haven't finished the 2 cul-de-sacs. That would be part of the next phase. They would finish out the subdivision.
and that's all they have to have done
Unit
is for
2.
their phase 1.
And they've got full retention, right?
Yeah, the detention basin is actually, it probably needs to be platted as part of this phase.
That's what I
because-
would think.
And that is actually shown in what would be phase 2. That's obviously at the low part of the property.
Well, is the financing already done for this phase 1? Is that?
That's not
Let's hear
mine.
from
That's
the
not our
applicant
problem.
and see.
No, but I mean, I thought you said
mine
it was for
work.
financing reasons if this was put before us.
For a partial, so they could try to move forward in, getting a plat recorded so they can start selling some lots and start building houses. That's
Hey, Travis Fuller, partner HFTC.
620 Mabryhood Road North, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37932. We are actually building every one of the homes in this subdivision, and the reason for putting this into 2 phases is, as Mark said, we've got a laundry list of items on there, and it's pretty difficult to stabilize grass in the summer around here. But we met on site, did a walkthrough. All of our paving is done on both phases, and it's been completed on the main road in this project. And we have, as a matter of fact, gone through this week, and even after our meeting with Mark, did a little backfilling and re-hydro-seeded about 5 bare spots that were on that right side of the grass. So as a developer, tonight's the first night I'm kind of glad we got some rain done, because we hydro-seeded this morning, which will help our stabilization process. Our goal is to plat this side so we can immediately start 4 homes of construction in the first 4 homes on the eastern side of those 14 lots. One of the requirements that's on the list that we left out is there's a calming device on the main road, which was put in the design parameters to slow traffic. And we had discussed with our inspector on that deal, and it was just a communication issue. He told us that we didn't have to do that until we finished construction. But after our walkthrough with Mark and Bart and the staff the other day, they want that to be completed. And we'll obviously, we've already rescheduled to have that portion of stuff done next week as well. And it'll be before there are any COs or anything that are in there from a safety standpoint.
I know that, but where's the traffic?
Is that number one, Mark?
Hmm?
Is that number one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the traffic calming
Yes,
islands.
ma'am.
And where is the traffic calming island?
I just circled it. It's, I think it was on that first cul-de-sac, isn't it, or is it the upper one?
It's the upper cul-de-sac.
It's the upper one, okay. Yeah,
It's actually in between the upper and the lower cul-de-sac. It's
remember.
on the top side portion of the the lower cul-de-sac.
Yeah, maybe in this, I think it's,
Is it in this drawing? It's not in this drawing.
That right there.
it's right there.
Towards the left, yes.
The thought was, it's basically only slowing people down and they're going south, because you're going uphill in the other direction. So, I mean, you still could be going fast, I guess, but it is a straight shot otherwise, so it's very important that they get that traffic calming in place and make it to where it is pronounced, and
Not shown on this drawing. Okay. I'm glad I'm not seeing something that's
It's
not
not
there.
finished.
Part of their preliminary plat,
It's
though,
not
that we
finished.
approved.
Okay.
Yes.
Is why it's not, and it's not really part of a final plat typically.
Oh, it isn't?
No,
Okay.
it wouldn't show up on that. It's
Okay.
all within the right of way.
Okay.
It's on the preliminary plat, the construction plans that were approved.
Why wouldn't it be on a final plat?
Well, I mean, it's a physical structure that mostly the plat is concerned with property line formation
Okay,
and
okay,
easement line
okay.
formation
It's 'cause a legal
typically.
document.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're transferring.
Down at the courthouse
Yeah.
versus the preliminary plat has all the design details in it.
Yeah, it'll have your utilities and your walking trails, and this will have walking trail easements.
Okay.
And those kinds of things, rights of ways, other
Understood.
easements. So,
And you all are agreeable to all these
Yes, ma'am.
subject twos?
Yes, like I said, we've already knocked out a good portion of them, and we'll diligently work to finish the rest of them.
Including, you're working with Mark on the detention pond?
Yes.
Are you
Well,
satisfied with that, Mark?
well, I mean, that's something we'll just have to work it out with, if you all are comfortable with
Are you
moving
saying
forward
comment
with the
number
plat.
9 covers that?
At Lot 36, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, what we were talking about with comment number 9 is, since the detention basin is actually accommodating drainage with this phase, it probably ought to be platted as part of this phase. And
Do you think that'd be possible, Travis,
we-
to pick that up? Obviously, the fear would be if something happened to you or your team, and then you guys stopped after this, and what's left, and all of a sudden we'd have a subdivision without a detention pond in it.
Right.
And so I think that's really what we've got to make sure that we can try to pick up.
Well, we'll obviously make that amendment from an engineering standpoint, but
It's also my understanding that we have a letter of credit amount that's going to be required for that detention pond as well.
Where is the detention pond going to be located?
Lot 36.
It's acting as a sediment basin right now.
36, yeah, I see.
Right there.
You think that these subject twos, when these subject twos are done, this final plat is ready? Is that what you're
For
saying?
phase one.
For
Or
phase
unit
one. For phase one.
I think
there's a
what
lot
needs
of
to be
work there, but
pointed
yeah.
out, that there is substantial letters of credit that the applicant's willing to post to guarantee completion of some items, which we normally, the letter of credit, the $97,000 letter of credit is not necessarily something we would normally require unless they wanted to go binder only and not do the top coat. But there are some things in here that we've added above and beyond what we would normally do for a final plat. So I think the applicant's kind of putting his money where his mouth is to try to guarantee that these things will be completed.
One other thing, I don't know if this affects your covenants, but we'll need to have your covenants approved by the town attorney before you get building permits. So that's something I know you got them, you're working on them, but I don't know if phasing it affects that or not, but you might want to make sure you get that to me so I can have our attorney.
Does that need to be in the
that.
subject twos?
It could be, yeah, that's
So
fine.
add a 13.
Yeah, 13.
It's typically we make that we make sure that that's been recorded before we actually issue a building permit. But that could certainly be an additional subject to.
So subdivision covenants have been recorded? Is that what we're looking for?
Approved by the town attorney and then recorded, yes.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Anybody in the audience have any questions or comments? Have a motion?
I'd like to offer a motion for approval of the final plat, phase, Unit 1 of Easton Park subdivision, subject to items 1 through 13.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
What was item 13?
Discussion and public hearing on a site plan for remodel of McDonald's at 11205 Kingston Pike, 1 acres, McDonald's USA LLC applicant.
This particular item is, as mentioned there, it's a complete remodel of the existing McDonald's facility on Kingston Pike. And specifically, this particular project would not expand the footprint of the building or increase the coverage on the site. It's kind of a challenging site. To the south is the floodplain, and it's right at the 1 acre minimum lot size. And basically, what they're doing with this particular project is bringing the ADA requirements up to code. They're basically modifying their existing drive-through to address some stacking issues and to move it closer to the current model that McDonald's has for drive-throughs. They would be replacing their menu board and canopy as part of this project. And then they're renovating the actual appearance of the building. They're removing the bay windows and the mansard roof, and they're going back. That's what's existing there on the screen. And then what they're proposing is there before you. It actually increases the percentage of brick and masonry on the building because they're going back with a brick veneer on the additional areas, and it's also going to be a taller building that would screen the HVAC units. And as you know, right now they're pretty visible out there. So that's another component of what they're doing, which actually brings this building more into compliance with our architectural design standards. They're sealing the parking lot and restriping the parking spaces again, and that's part of the ADA compliance as well. They're evaluating their storm sewer system, kind of making sure it's working properly and there's no ponding that's occurring, and trying to address that. And then they're also removing all of their existing non-compliant signage, and that includes the big, tall M pole sign that's been there for a long time. So they'll be removing that and basically going back with signage that complies with our current sign ordinance. So I think from a staff's perspective, it looks like a great improvement to the property. We've been working with their architect. She's here if you all have any specific questions, but we recommend approval of this project. There were a few subject twos that were at your places, which I've already discussed with the architect. I think all those are doable. Like I mentioned earlier, the HVAC units are being screened by this remodel. They're not currently screened. They're very visible. So with those subject twos, the staff would recommend approval of this renovation project.
And you think we can get the dumpsters in the either existing enclosure, or maybe they might need a new expanded enclosure?
Yeah, we need to look at that. I don't know where she went. Where did she go? Oh, there you are. Okay. She's hiding in the back there. Okay.
I know you've got an enclosure, but I just don't think all your facilities fit in the enclosure, so you've got to have one sitting out in the parking lot.
No, I'll go over and look when I leave here, but they have expanded them in the past if they need the room.
Okay. I mean, I hate for you to lose any parking, but I'm not sure how else ever to resolve that issue.
Let's find out who she is and give us an address.
101 Falls Park Drive, Greenville, South Carolina.
Thank you.
We can look at that. They like to have all of them contained. too.
Okay.
And then the dumpster will be upgraded with the building. It'll match the building.
It looks like you're going to have a front door. Is that going to have a patio area out front? No.
No patio. Sorry.
It's probably about one of the tightest sites that you guys deal with. I mean, and we're delighted you're doing this. We've been hoping this would come for a long time, and I know there's been some push and pull trying to get this done, and we sure appreciate everything that you guys are doing.
It's very nice. And the inside's all upgraded too. The restrooms inside will all be upgraded to ADA compliance.
And you're all okay with the subject twos that we have?
Yes.
Is this going to be 75% masonry?
Yeah.
Yeah, it
That's
looks
going
like
to be
more.
higher than that.
Probably higher than that.
Yeah, it'll be higher than that. It's mostly brick.
Yeah.
Did they bring boards for us to see, or?
There's only really a couple samples. You can see this is I mean, I can.
I'll pass that. Yeah.
This is the brain wall with the M on it. It's a tile.
That's pretty.
That they put, and then the on the top is this corrugated metal, and then really it's just the colors on the brick. It's just these two.
Is the brick that's currently on there staying, or okay, so you're just kind
Well,
of,
not above, because where the Mansard roof comes off.
yes,
then
so you're
you have the
matching,
brick in the-
trying to match,
Yeah,
okay.
they'll
It looks like you're,
extend
according to the
brick.
plans, you're actually going to paint the brick. So
Yes, on the
Okay.
existing
Yeah, okay.
brick. That's right. It's just being painted.
Which color's the bottom two?
The Fairview taupe and the darker color.
this is all part of your corporate theme. Is that where you're adopting this palette?
I think I had her go look down the street. The one right down the street just got done.
Which?
By Cedar Bluff.
I told you the address.
Okay, the one that was just
Kingston-
recently, in the last
Kingston
year or
Pike.
so,
Kingston
renovated?
Pike.
9501.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, same colors, same, yeah.
Same of the color.
Is
this
this
a-
store company owned?
Glad you're taking that sign.
No, it's owned, it's a.
Be a
I think
brown.
it's
Is that,
franchisee. Franchisee. Yeah.
And he has lots of.
and this brown? Is that right? Or that's what's on the? Is it the color of this is brown, like what's shown here?
Iron Mountain and Fairview taupe.
There's the one out at Cedar Bluff. I think it's mostly gray.
Yeah, it looks more
That's,
gray.
Yeah.
That prototype is a couple years ago, so it's that,
Okay.
these are all new color schemes for the.
Yeah, I like
the ones
this
that are
I kind of
all
like
being
the
redone.
brown better than the gray also.
It's more.
Gray's kinda sterile.
appropriate for-
Make sure.
Are all the franchises being required to update like
Every
this?
single McDonald's is being touched in the next couple years.
Oh.
Whether the interior's being remodeled or the interior and the exterior, but all the McDonald's you grew up with are going to go away. All those red mansard roofs are going to be gone, and this is what your kids are going to grow up with.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
And stay in operation while you do it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the question.
Well, I guess, and how long do you guys perceive this happening? I mean, McDonald's
The
is-
remodel?
Yeah.
It takes them about 6 to 8 weeks to
Do the
It's very quick.
exterior and the interior at the same time?
You
Okay.
shut down actually for that, don't you? You're still able to function?
The drive-through stays open, unless they have to really mess with a water or sewer line or something that affects the operation. They build an interior wall that separates the kitchen.
Okay.
And it just, the whole thing gets demoed. And they close the dining room, but the drive-through stays open.
Wow.
And then they can close the restrooms and do all that.
I'm sure your employees appreciate you staying open, otherwise having a little hiatus there.
Yeah.
Well, no, this is great. We're delighted that, I think there's been some of us that wondered, why are all the other McDonald's getting renovated except ours? And we know there was some, it's a little bit of heartburn probably with your signage, and we appreciate you guys coming around and
No, I
addressing
think
that.
it's more the
They use this-
operators
they use this
staging their
signage other
different
places in the
stores.
country.
For, he might have just finished one and now he's starting the other one, so. But yeah, they're all gonna be touched and they're
Well,
gonna
this
be
is-
nice.
Do you have a time frame for the Farragut store?
January. January start is when they wanted to start it and, finish, I would think, by the end of February.
Thank
Anybody-
you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Have a motion?
I move to accept the remodeling plans for McDonald's with the provision that they meet the 4 subject tos.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
I think, you have any other samples flying around?
Item number 11, discussion and public hearing on an amendment to the site plan for the Knoxville Farragut Storage LLC, 11775 Snyder Road, 6 acres, Zone C-2, Knoxville Farragut Storage LLC applicant.
Last month, you all reviewed a site plan for a mini warehouse development on the north side of Kingston, the interstate, off of Campbell Station Road, north of Snyder Road, east side of, or west side of North Campbell Station Road. So, the site plan was conditionally approved, but there was some discussion about the materials on the buildings. There's 3 buildings as part of this project. There's a 3-story building that's basically at the corner. It's the most prominent building, and then there's 2 single-story buildings that would basically wrap in behind the taller building. And so the comment that the staff made and the commissioners seemed to agree with last time was that it didn't appear that the masonry requirement for 75% masonry on the net facade area of the buildings was, masonry product that would fit our architectural design standards. There was some question about some of the material not being detailed in modules that would resemble traditional masonry panels. So the applicant has gone back and made some revisions to what they're proposing. And I know the architect, Gretchen Weaver's here, and she's got some revised boards that she can show you. I've got the old ones back here behind me if you want me to get those out. But it does appear like they've taken a lot of the bigger concrete sections that we had concerns about, and they have detailed those more in, consistent with traditional masonry modules. With that, I'll turn it over to Gretchen, and she can.
This is the revision.
Yes, it is. She's got some color renderings that'll probably do better justice with this. And again, I can show the boards from last month if that would be helpful. I can compare those.
Hi, I'm Gretchen Weaver from SAA Architects. Our address is 600 North Hartley Street, Suite 150, York, PA, 17404. As you can see, these two are the revised elevations, and these two are the old elevations from last time. You can see that we have increased the amount of masonry, and that we've actually changed to propose all traditional cavity wall brick construction. And we do have a materials board that I can show you in a minute. But we did do a study to make sure that these fiber cement accent panels are taking up 25% of each side of the main building, and the remainder is either brick or stone on the main buildings. And this is the rendering of that main building then. The smaller buildings you can see are behind, they're hidden behind the building, so you can't really tell.
Put those up and let them compare the two.
Sure.
Yeah.
How do we want to do that?
Maybe just lean them up here on the, to this front row. It's not as busy.
Smaller buildings, we had proposed those to be brick last time, and they're still brick. So we've got almost 100% coverage on masonry on these smaller buildings. And we do have a crude rendering of the smaller buildings. This would be the face that backs up to the main building.
How many, will there be more than one of these additional buildings, or is it just one building?
Yes, there are two.
And it actually has more articulation than it shows up on that rendering. It's not really flat like that across.
It does that along the backside. And they sit like this. So this is the main building, and that's that main corner. And then these two sit behind it.
And quite frankly, you're not really even going to see this elevation unless you're in your site.
Right.
You would see the back of the building from Campbell Station. Maybe topographically, you may not be able to see it. Maybe as you're coming down the hill. But otherwise, like this elevation, you're never going to see it unless you're there. I mean, this is the big one. Is I think most of what we were concerned about is because that's at a major intersection in the town of Farragut, and you've got a lot of visibility right there at Campbell Station and I-40.
Right. That's exactly right. And so we're proposing 3 different colors of brick. The black and the white are obviously at the corner here.
Very bitter.
And then the stair towers are also done in the black, and then we've got this taupey brown in here that we would use the white as an accent with details. And then we have this as the base. It'll be a slightly larger base, but this would be the base around all of the buildings, and then we'd have a cast stone band that wraps them. Then these panels will be made out of fiber cement, traditional panels. If you want a closer look at
I'd like
this.
to see those.
We'll be passing. Can we pass it down?
Sure, absolutely. It's kind of heavy, so.
It's not heavy.
But it did go in my carry-on.
Yeah, thanks for coming all the way from Pennsylvania.
Mark, are you satisfied with the brick coverage on this?
I mean, if y'all are comfortable with the detailing of it, I think that was kind of if you kind of compare those two images, you might have to come up to it and look at it. I mean, if it's helpful for you to come around and look at it up close, because you can see the detail better if it's, when you get up close to compare the two. You have much larger concrete sections in the older version than what you have now. So, I think they've addressed that concern, in my opinion. It's up to you all. But it does appear that they've detailed those more in a to resemble traditional masonry
I've
panels.
got a curiosity question. Why would an owner choose in that kind of prime property to put a storage facility there on that property rather than
Well, that's not an
some
answer I can
upscale
help
restaurant?
you
or-
with.
That's probably not an answer she can give you. She's an architect.
Yeah,
Said that's a curiosity
Design it.
question.
Right.
can't help you with that one.
Run the numbers.
Assure you that if the performa didn't work, the developer wouldn't put it there.
Yeah.
Correct.
So there's an opportunity to make money, which is the
You
American way.
want to pass
You
that
know
one? You
more
want me to
about that
pass
than
that
I
one
do,
around?
Noah.
Well, I try. It doesn't always work that way.
But I just see coming off the interstate there, you know, and see that nice.
I agree, but I mean, they're compliant within our zoning.
Yep.
And
That's
I mean,
right. I mean,
they've
we-
complied with everything we've asked them to do. It's not a radically
Understand.
different design, but I think you guys have done a really good job of trying to address some of our concerns. And we appreciate that.
Does anybody,
Nice looking
Yeah.
storage
Oh,
facility.
I agree.
Where storage facilities go.
Your doors and windows. That's the aluminum.
Please wear that. Frequent flyers.
Cut way down on that, like colored concrete stuff, which
Yeah.
is good.
Yeah, the rendering doesn't show the stone very well, but.
Where's the stone? Where's that?
It's the whole bottom first floor, if you will.
Okay, that's all that stuff. Okay.
Black brick.
And you know, we can't approve your signage as part of this approval process tonight. That'll need to go to another body. So,
and on the bottom, you have the those roll-up metal doors?
Yes.
She weren't there.
Pre-finished.
has everybody looked at this all the way down, Roseanne?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
But you can see the detailing on this image, that's why I think it's important to look at it.
Yes. Looks like brick.
You did good, Mark.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Anybody in the audience?
I'd like to offer a motion for approval to the amendment of the site plan for the Knoxville Farragut Storage LLC, 11775 Snyder Road.
Second.
Roseanne has second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Roseanne.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for doing that. Item number 12, discussion and public hearing on an amendment to the site plan for the partial redevelopment of Station West Development, 11311 Station West Drive, 2.51 acres, Zone C-2, 11311 Station West LLC, David Weiser, applicant.
Just trying to lessen her travel. Carry on problems.
Hope you have a roller bag with that.
To take back as much as she brought, so. This is a site plan. This involves a site plan amendment to a plan that was approved actually back in April this year. And of course, when it was originally presented to us, we did ask the question about the dumpster situation. They have an existing dumpster. It's actually not part of this phase. This is out where for those of you, I'm sure all of you all know, but this is a building that was demolished, and they're going back and basically adding a new building where the Elliott's Boots used to be and will be in the future. They'll actually be the center tenant in this building. So the question came up about the dumpster situation. They have an existing dumpster along Campbell Lakes Drive that's to the east of the area that's being redeveloped at this time. And basically, when construction started, one of the tenants requested that they needed a dumpster and they needed a recycling dumpster. So they have come back with a site plan revision. Let me see if I've got that. Well, I thought I had the site plan on here.
You do at the end.
I don't think it is, actually.
screen.
Huh.
Oh.
It's in the
Oh, well.
packet. It's in our packet.
It is. It would be the dumpster enclosure. Actually, is along Campbell Lakes Drive. It's behind the new building, and it does meet the 20-foot setback, even though the rest of the parking lot does not. The applicant did work with the town staff to make sure that the dumpster enclosure would meet our setback requirements from the right-of-way.
Situated like it looks
Yes.
like in the middle of the
Yeah,
parking lot.
so they got creative. It's actually, there's plenty of space there. That kind of detailed area there, that's just heavy-duty concrete.
Okay.
That's not the actual limit of the enclosure itself. So there's more space than would appear to be the case there.
Is that currently a flower bed that those are going to be in, or is that
Part of it's a landscaped area and parking spaces. Yeah, that's being affected by this. They are losing some parking.
Is that going to change lot coverage?
The lot coverage would actually, I'm trying to think here. I think it might actually be reduced.
Well, if
slightly.
they're able to create landscaping somewhere else, that mitigates that.
Yeah. I'm not sure, to be honest. I know the applicants here, they might be able to speak to that.
I'm wondering, can they ask for variance, or is there a reason for it?
Initially, they wanted to build the dumpster right in line with the rest of the parking lot, and because it's a completely new structure, they, worked with us to figure out a way to put this new structure where it would meet the 20-foot setback. So that's how it ended up in that placement and configuration. It is along a street. This property fronts on 3 public streets, so it's kind of challenging to situate a dumpster in an area that's not in the front yard, but it is behind the building, behind the new building, and it probably wouldn't be visible from Campbell Station Road just due to distance. And there already is a dumpster along Campbell Lakes Drive in the northeast corner of the property that's not part of this redevelopment. So the staff's comfortable with the location of the proposed dumpster. That's one modification to the site plan that's being requested. There were some subject twos related to this, but and then the second site modification that they're requesting involves that Elliott's boot space in the middle. And they're requesting to, in the areas that did show window space, this is what was approved, the frontage. And you can see you had these traditional windows. And what they asked the owner to petition before the town would be to go back with basically these roll-up garage doors that are kind of a new look. You see them, I see them increasingly in different areas. I think they're kind of a neat look personally, but it's basically this area. It's still window space. It's just, it could be rolled up at times if they so desired, and it gives it kind of a unique look to it. There would be landscaping between the front of the doors and the parking lot, so you couldn't just, walk out with a pair of shoes without. Well, you could, and I'm not sure how often they'll have these open. I think it's more of just kind of a, an interesting aesthetic enhancement in their view. I think the staff agrees. I think it's a kind of a neat application. I'm not sure how practical and functional it's going to be, but I think it does add some variety and some interest to the building. They still obviously are going to have to make sure they can meet the town's adopted energy code, and that's something that they'd have to look at with our code staff. But that particular aspect of the site plan amendment, the staff recommends approval. of that, subject to the energy code compliance and any other applicable building code compliance issues. And then the dumpster, there was a couple of recommendations there dealing with the dumpster enclosure. It would need to be brick, because the predominant masonry material on the new building is brick. And we need a detail for the gate. There's kind of a big picture, image of it, but we need more detail of the specifics of that. And then I think that was it as far as that goes. Yeah, as far as the dumpster enclosure. And like Noah said, I think you're going to need to look at what the lot coverage is, and we'll have to amend the landscape plan as well, because we will probably want to have some plant material around the dumpster enclosure, and enhance the landscaping in that portion of the site, because in our architectural design standards, we talk about trying to minimize the visual impact of dumpsters and similar structures that are situated in front yards, essentially. And this would technically be a front yard. So those would be things that they would need to address on their site and their landscape plan.
So
Go ahead.
sorry. Is it because that is Campbell Lakes Drive is considered a front drive that 20-foot setback comes into play?
Yes, that's right.
What is it if it's just not if it's
The
just
side is 10, because it's considered part of the parking lot.
Is that dumpster replacing 3 or 4 parking places there?
I don't recall how many.
3.
Is it 3?
I have some of the answers if y'all want me to chime in. My name's John Osborne. Office address is 132 Sherlake Lane in Knoxville. And yes, it did displace 3 spaces. There's still 124 on the site. We think the lot coverage is good. We'll obviously check anything. As far as landscaping you brought up, we had discussed maybe doing something behind the dumpster. We're very comfortable building it out of brick. We think that's fine. We thought that the wood siding looked nice, but we think brick will look great. We agree, need to do a gate detail when we resubmit the drawings. But the moral of the story is we did want to honor the setback, and we called a special meeting with Mark to try to figure out a way to do it. We needed more dumpster space thanks to the tenants that are going in there that we had. We couldn't utilize the dumpster situation if the original one in the corner up there in the northeast, even if we were to empty it every day. So we kind of had to do it this way, again, just for the tenants that we've got in there, and we think it complies with everything and are very willing to follow staff recommendations.
I like both of these changes.
Excuse me, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I like both the changes. I like the roll-up doors. I think they're super cool. And I appreciate the fact that you guys are trying to bring the dumpster situation into compliance with the setbacks and the enclosure. Obviously, you got to add some landscaping on the back sides and the sides.
That's where we would add.
Right, and you can, and the VRB can deal with that. So I'm real happy with the changes here.
kind of contained in there?
From which direction are the dumpsters accessed, emptied?
From the south side.
It's like you were going kind of towards the drive-through, Roseanne. So if you were going in
Campbell
between the
Lakes
buildings,
Drive.
the trash truck would want to come in
Okay.
between the two buildings, and they could head straight to one of the dumpster enclosures.
That's exactly right. I think that's why the civil drew it that way.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to want to do it during your peak, whatever your rush hour is for your restaurant. I mean, if you've got a coffee shop in there, you're not going to want to do it at, between 7 and 9.
Correct.
It's going to be a little crowded in there, but I think it does work. It does function.
Ideally, we had these, we didn't love it coming out into the middle of the parking lot, but like Mark said earlier, those are pavers there. It doesn't extend nearly as far as it looks from the drawing. It'd be great if it were flush, but it wouldn't be we wouldn't be able to honor the setback. We feel like we kind of inherited a weird situation there because ordinarily we wouldn't have developed right to the line there. So we kind of had to take it off, and that's the one issue there, I think, is that it has that dead space. But again, we plan on mitigating that, or can at least, with landscaping. So.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Is there no opportunity for a variance on this in the ordinance
For what?
language for the setback?
We originally kind of came along those lines because we actually kind of had it drawn to where it was just took up the parking spaces and didn't come out. And we met with Mark, we kind of went through it, and we had a couple iterations, but then we kind of settled on this staggered approach because we just felt we've got plenty of parking. I mean, there's still over a space per 200 square feet of both buildings combined. We think lot coverage should be great. We just felt that we could solve the problem without needing a variance. So
So if you're not looking for one, I can't limit it, but.
honestly, I love it flush, but it just seemed like this was the path of least resistance, and it still works, and it would still look good. So.
Okay.
And we told them they had the right to request that, but we do appreciate them working with the staff and trying to figure out a compliant condition, because I couldn't think of a reason why the BZA would grant a variance for that.
Yeah, it's hard to say that's a hardship.
No, it's not,
So
in my opinion.
we do appreciate your work on it.
But what it kind of, to me, and I'm sure it'll look nice. I know you guys will make it look nice, but to me, it somewhat compromises. You're going to drive by it and look at it and think, why is this like this?
I think it's less intrusive than it looks on paper. We're looking at that. I think you had said pavers, or a lot of times they'll do heavy duty concrete so the trash trucks don't tear up the asphalt.
Yeah.
And so what you're looking at is the bulk of what we're seeing on a two-dimensional piece of paper is that you're not going to actually see it in the field. You're actually just going to see the actual enclosures, not all that hashed area. I mean, yes, it's there, but nevertheless, it's not near as obtrusive as what it looks like it's on paper.
Okay.
I think we'll all be real happy with, especially when it's landscaped.
I think
And this
it'll
is real typical to what other developments in the town of Farragut do. And they have to comply with those 20-foot setbacks. Sometimes you just got to put it where it makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
In our here, what do we need to include? Do we have any subject twos that need to be included?
the two I'd like to see in there is that the lot coverage, the post-development lot coverage, does not exceed the pre-development lot coverage.
Well, I think we've got to break it down to the things that are in
Well,
there.
that may be the only and then the other things are, I mean, they can't get a building permit for, things unless they meet the energy code, the building code, and the fire codes. We can include that as a subject too, but the reality is that's every project that we approve at this body is always subject to those
Not
building
really
codes.
essential to include that.
Well, you do have some subject to
The brick
here,
and the
the
gate
brick
details.
rather than the
Yes.
wood.
Right.
Is that
Right.
something that we need to include in our
Yes,
subject
I
to?
mean,
Yeah.
if you
Well, I think he's already
agree with
changed.
that.
My rendering actually shows it in brick.
Your rendering shows the outside walls in brick, but if you look, it also shows the north wall.
Okay, so we
in-
do need to
in
make
the
that a
wood
subject
side,
too.
and we will resubmit that. So,
Okay,
yeah.
that does need to
And
be a
we have
subject
no
too then.
problem. And you say we need to revise our gate detail. I don't even think we really gave you a gate detail, so we need a nice gate detail
Right.
for sure.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Then the
Okay.
landscaping we can address with
VRB.
with an
Move for
amended
approval
landscape
of an
plan.
amendment to the site plan for the partial redevelopment Station West development, subject to the recognizing the brick rather than the wood for the enclosure of the additional dumpster, and also for providing the gate detail to be provided with the revised dumpster enclosure plans.
And Ed, you want to throw lot coverage in there?
Well, we've got it all.
Confirmation that lot.
Confirmation
coverage
that,
is-
that
Of the lot coverage.
okay.
The roll-up doors too, that was a
Yeah.
Change to the
component
roll-up doors.
that was
Okay.
changed.
I'll second Ed's motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
The next three items are for discussion, and they are related. Mark, how do you want to handle that? Do you want us to go through them all at the same time, or do we need to separate them?
Just go through them separately. They are all related. And
Do anything back with her video?
not until 10.
Not till 10. She's okay till 10. Okay.
I'm all after this.
Okay.
Yeah, the first one is, have you already read this?
No.
Okay, sorry.
Item number 13, discussion on request to rezone parcel 95, a portion of parcel 94, tax map 152 North, or N. Group A, end of Thornbush Lane in Sheffield Subdivision, 7.2 acres, from R-1 to A to R-OSR, David Wilkinson, applicant. This is for discussion purposes only.
Rezonings are always discussed as workshop initially. So that's why these two are being workshopped. This particular rezoning request involves rezoning parcel 95, which is at the end of Thornbush Lane, which was constructed as part of Phase 1 of Sheffield subdivision off Turkey Creek Road. And then a portion of parcel 94, and it's basically that area that's in yellow on the screen. It's part of this particular rezoning request. This would involve a re-subdivision plat, and that will be presented to you all for a vote next time, along with the rezonings and a preliminary plat, probably. So they'll have to move that property line basically to the south to basically contain all that yellow area as part of this rezoning. Most of the property is currently zoned R1. The portion that is being re-subdivided from parcel 94 is currently zoned agricultural A, and then both of those are going to be that portion of the agricultural and the R1 are proposed to be R1 OSR, which is the same zoning as the Sheffield subdivision. And in fact, this what they'll be developing on this property will become part of the Sheffield subdivision, part of the homeowners association. They'll be subject to all the covenants and restrictions of Sheffield. So in looking at the future land use map, evaluating this rezoning, it appears to be the request is compliant with the future land use map and the surrounding plan of development and Sheffield, how Sheffield's currently zoned. So the staff, when this does come before you for recommendation to the board, would support this particular rezoning request. So I don't know if y'all have any questions about this. On to the next one.
Okay, no questions, and we'll move on. Number 14, discussion on a request to rezone a portion of parcel 94, tax map 152N, Group A, 3.69 acres from A to R-1, David Wilkinson, applicant.
This involves the area that's shown in green, and it's obviously related to the previous item. There's an existing house on the green property there, and as I mentioned earlier, that's currently all zoned agricultural. But when that portion, the north portion of that property, is re-subdivided and made part of the enclave at Sheffield, then the property to the south could not, remain as agricultural because the minimum lot size in agricultural zoning is 5 acres. So we couldn't approve a re-subdivision and a rezoning that creates a non-compliant condition. So the request for this particular portion of parcel 94 is to rezone it from agricultural to R1. In the future land use map, both parcels 94 and 95 are shown as open space cluster, and the request involving lot 95 that we reviewed as part of the previous item was consistent with the plan. This portion is not fully consistent with the plan. I think it's consistent from a staff's perspective. I think it's not inconsistent, but it's not open space cluster, but it is low density residential. So there's about a little over 3.5 acres in this parcel 94, so it has limited developable area, and the staff is comfortable with the rezoning request to go from agricultural to R1 for that portion of the parent tract of parcel 94. So we also support that rezoning request, and I don't think at the staff level an amendment to the future land use map is really necessary for that, because I don't see them as really inconsistent.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on this part?
Looks like number 14 would come prior to 13.
14,
Kind of both at the same time.
well, they're both, I mean, they're
Or at
both
the same
related.
time, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, they're both going to change, so,
Yeah.
yeah. But since it could be rezoned to OSR because the minimum lot size there is 5 acres too. So R1 was the most logical option. And that's why the request is for that, so.
Being used.
No more
I have
questions on
any
that?
questions on
Anybody have
that.
any questions? We'll move on to item number 15 then, discussion on a concept plan for the enclave at Sheffield, parcel 95 and a portion of parcel 94, tax map 152N, Group A, end of Thornbush Lane in the Sheffield subdivision, 7.2 acres, 18 lots. David Wilkinson, applicant, also for discussion only.
This concept plan, they wanted to present a concept plan, I think, just to make sure that what they're proposing is acceptable to the commission, before they, finish up the preliminary plat, which I believe they're submitting that Monday. So this particular concept includes 18 house lots and 3 open space lots. Like I mentioned earlier, it will become part of the Sheffield subdivision. The area there was platted as part of Phase 1 of Sheffield. It was just large tracts, that would be subsequently developed, and that's what's happening here. What they're proposing is to extend from Thornbush Lane 2 cul-de-sacs in kind of a U shape there, as you see. One of the staff's comments when we looked at this initially was, as required in our subdivision regulations, look for a way to provide a vehicular connection out of the property in more than just Thornbush Lane. So we posed the question about whether they could try to extend, a street somewhere to the south so that when the Galbraith property, that tract that we looked at that's being requested to go to R1, if it ever redeveloped, then our street could be extended down to Turkey Creek Road. There's a topographic challenge with that. There's a very large ditch that runs through the southern portion of this area, and it basically, it would be, let's see, actually that's the north edge of it. The rest of it doesn't show up, but basically, all this dashed area is a large ditch, a 70-foot drainage easement. And frankly, to extend a street through there would be a pretty big undertaking, and you really wouldn't have a lot of, house lots on the property to the south. So it seemed to the staff, at least, that there was a reasonable argument for, a variance from that requirement, given the topographic issues that are inherent with this area. That's something that when this comes before you as part of the either concept plan revision or preliminary plat, you'll have to take an action on the variance request specifically. So I don't know how you all feel about that, and that's one thing that we talked about. The other thing was trying to figure out how to arrange the pedestrian facilities in the development and try to work with Sheffield to look for opportunities to connect to their existing facilities, both sidewalk and walking trail. So one of the things that they're proposing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, but I think you're trying to work with the Sheffield Homeowners Association to connect potentially a sidewalk along Thornbush Lane to Enclosure, which is the main street in Sheffield that is due east of this. And then basically they are proposing a new sidewalk that comes in, and it pretty much on this side it goes to here, And then there's a new sidewalk over on the south side, cul-de-sac to that location. And then from those, there's walking trails, 8-foot wide walking trails that would go along the eastern portion of this phase. This walking trail on the north side, the plan is to connect that to an existing walking trail that has been constructed as part of Phase 1 in Sheffield that actually goes down to Virtue Road, and it crosses the bridge across Little Turkey Creek. So that would get this phase connected to that trail system, and then hopefully a sidewalk along Thornbush Lane that would connect to the sidewalk on Eaglecrest. And then as far as the south, due to the ditch, they're proposing just to have a turnaround at this point. You know, who knows what could happen in the future, but it maybe provide for the opportunity, at least through an easement or something to the property line, that if conditions ever became favorable, that something could be extended on down into the Galbraith property if that were ever redeveloped. And then this is kind of getting a little complicated here, but messed up. But another thing the staff suggested when we were reviewing this concept with the applicant was most of the area is an open field, probably 3/4 of it, but you do have along the western portion of the property, you got some tree covered areas, and since this is an open space residential zoning district that they're requesting, we asked them to try to consider making a lot of that area as part of their permanent open space. So they have worked with the staff to do that. They've got about a 40-foot wide open space area that basically is at the edge of house lots, and then the property to the west that is in between this development and Little Turkey Creek. And then they also, there were some residents that came to the staff developer meeting that were concerned about street and house lots being platted behind their existing houses. So they've added an open space lot at each entrance point. Basically would accommodate the walking trail as well. That would be landscaped and part of their streetscape plan that you all would be looking at as part of the preliminary plat. So it could be landscaped and provide some, landscape protection, I guess, from the street to the existing house lots to the east. So that's some things that they've done in working with the staff. We still have a few relatively minor comments from our perspective on the concept plan, but I think they're all things that could be taken care of. And so I don't know if you all have any questions about the plan or anything I can try to answer on that.
When do you anticipate this coming back?
The plan is all this will come back next month, and they'll actually have a preliminary plat. I think they more or less wanted some guidance to see if they were on the right path. Get your all's thoughts about the general design and make sure before they get too far into it that there's nothing that's major that stands out that needs to be addressed.
Mention was made of this being a part of the Sheffield subdivision.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this going to be a separate covenants for this enclave portion, or how's that going to work?
The covenants, as I understand it, will be amended to accommodate this land and the development. I don't know if John's still here or not. Oh, Rick, is that right? Okay.
Then why are you giving it a separate name, the enclave?
We just picked that name thinking of some marketing ideas, and we don't know if we'll use it or not. It might just be Phase 4 of Sheffield.
Okay.
But
That's why I thought maybe we were going to have separate covenants.
no, we're going to follow the same restrictions, the
Okay.
And that's what we're doing.
So that'll dictate whether you're going to have the town attorney review the covenants then?
He's had some initial information sent to him about that didn't see any reason why that couldn't be incorporated as part of Sheffield.
Okay.
So,
Any more questions or comments? Does anybody in the audience have any questions or comments? Okay, in that case, we'll move on to item number 16, approval of utilities. Verizon installation of underground conduit along eastern portion of Kingston Pike.
Well, we appreciate y'all waiting around through the 15 items before you, but this is kind of
This is our intro to fair.
extension of utilities, approval of utilities is an item that typically is at the end of our agenda, and it's something that we rarely ever have. So this had to be added to the agenda. And it's really of such a scope, I think, that's why the staff felt like it probably needed to be workshopped. I know there's more detailed plan sheets in your packet. I just have the overview of the project on the PowerPoint. But basically, as I mentioned earlier at the start of the meeting, as far as the town's portion of this project, it would basically start at Level Road, Kingston Pike, on the north side of Kingston Pike. And there would be 1 to 2 inch conduit that would be bored. All of this is bored. There's no open cutting. And all of it's bored to at least a depth of 30 inches. So 30 inches minimum. Yeah, it could be a lot more than that, depending on what kind of conflicts that they run into potentially. There are overhead utilities, obviously along Kingston Pike, and we asked the question if those, if that could be accommodated on the overhead. And due to some of the existing utilities that are on in the system, and maybe the condition of some of the poles, it was apparently going to involve replacing a number of poles in order to accommodate that. And it was, I guess, more cost effective to just bore the entire project. As I understand it, unlike the Comcast project that you all looked at a couple of months ago on Parkside Drive mostly, this would not have any above ground structures at this time, no pedestals or anything like that. All of the work is proposed to be either within the right-of-way or the 10-foot utility easement that's just outside the right-of-way. We had some comments, and I kind of got this last week, but we have been working with the applicant for a long time, on trying to coordinate what we would need to have an adequate set of drawings. So there's some things that, would need to be coordinated, the traffic control. Is it going to affect access or any existing public infrastructure? Just the same discussion we had with Comcast, a couple of months ago, and I think there was a recommendation for a letter of credit for that based on an amount established by the town engineer. Then there's maybe some things that could just be cleaned up on the plans. The title page had some references to other jurisdictions, maybe some street names that needed to be labeled, and rights-of-way lines and easement lines that might need to be labeled and a little more clear and easy to read. So those kinds of things, which we can get that to the applicant, but I guess we were wanting to see if you all had any other concerns or issues, or I'm not sure what their time frame is on this project. A fair amount of the project's not in the town. It actually goes under the interstate along Level Road and over into Dutchtown. And so, I mean, it's a pretty ambitious project that's multi-jurisdictional, so.
You have no idea if the Farragut part will be started first or how that will
You all
work?
want to answer that? Come to the mic.
Hi, I'm Kim Sinclair with the Foresight Group, 200 North Prosperity, Knoxville. We would hope to start cutting sometime later this year in that area. This part would be one of our first portions. The project in its entirety goes all the way down through Loudon, up through Powell, Oak Ridge, Clinton, Anderson County, Seymour. So it is a large fiber extension, extending some fiber that's already in place.
Are you extending underground fiber or overhead
Both.
fiber?
We're-
So at some locations, you're going up a riser?
Correct.
Okay. You're going to have a couple of substantial creek crossings?
Correct.
How do you guys do that? How are you, I mean, it's solid rock in those creek beds, so I doubt you're going to be able to bore under the creek. But I'm just curious from application, how do you get it? Are you going to attach to the side of the bridge?
David Dickerson, Verizon, 603 Warehouse Lane in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's a business address. They make machines for that.
You can bore, you can drill through the rock under the creeks. Okay.
Another thing we were wanting to make sure about is, it's real tight there in front of the Campbell Station Inn.
Yeah.
And, there's the wall, and there's just not a lot of real estate there. We want to make sure that the work, particularly through that section, is well coordinated, and there's not any, everybody's clear on, where that's going to occur, and there wouldn't be any damage to any, public infrastructure, because that's kind of a
Are there no
critical
areas
area.
that you've got to come up to the surface to be able to make a tie?
Yeah, we'll have a flush mount to the ground.
A vault?
Full box, a vault, if you will.
Okay.
Usually about every 600 to 1,000 feet.
Okay.
Is that what these
On
squares
this-
are?
Yes,
Dead
it is.
squares.
Okay.
Yeah, they wouldn't be vertical like the Comcast, though, which is good.
They're not
We
a pedestal,
appreciate
they're
that.
flush mount
Yes,
pull boxes.
That's good. Yeah.
What
Push
kind
on
of
this,
sharing?
Drawings here are these little red
Roseanne,
dots
hold
are
on.
the,
Pull boxes? The little squares would be
Yeah.
pull boxes.
Okay, Roseanne.
What kind of sharing is done with other providers like Comcast and Charter and whatnot of this conduit? Is there any?
None.
So if Charter and Comcast want their own, they have to do the same thing?
I mean, that's what we have to do.
That's right.
They're not sharing with us, right?
Already
And we'd
did
be
that
more than happy
on
to do a joint build with
Parcel,
anybody that would like to
Comcast.
do a joint build. But there's been nobody that's voiced an opinion to do that.
But is it possible to share if you wanted to?
It's possible, but we're not putting in more than what we need for our.
It's just 1 2-inch conduit. So it's not, you're not talking a big pipe.
1 to 2
That is correct.
inch.
So
Do you have any idea at this time about the traffic disruption on Kingston Pike or any disruption of businesses, entrances along Kingston Pike?
We wouldn't plan on blocking any business entrance. Any work that we would do would conform to the manual uniform traffic control standards.
But there is going to be some digging. I mean, you're going to have a mini excavator out there digging a pit to be able to
Right.
make your tie-in to your pull boxes. So it's
Right,
not, I mean, there is some traditional construction activity. It's not like you can bore, 3 miles at a time when you're doing these projects.
That is correct. And then, of course, along the way, we'll actually try to locate the existing utilities to make sure that we don't damage those.
Mhm.
And there is a modicum of digging that happens for that.
I mean, I think to be consistent with what we've done in the past, I think there needs to be a revocable letter of credit, just like we've asked other contractors to post, and then it gets released if you do everything you say you're going to do, and you clean up your mess. So
Sounds good.
So this is for discussion and it will
I'll
be on
send
the-
them just the comments we had, and and hopefully we can. You want to put them first next time,
Okay,
since
yeah,
they had to
we'll-
sit through this.
since we tortured you tonight, we'll get you first on the agenda next month.
It's been fun.
I think we get to do it every month.
Unfortunately, we don't provide coffee, so.
I'll make sure to put them first.
Yeah, but I
and
think
we'll send you.
general consensus is we're glad you're doing what you're doing, and hopefully be a good thing for the public. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. 15 minutes to spare.
That's right.
The August 16, 2018 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission is adjourned.